You want to be a good person. You want your actions to be right, your choices to be moral, your life to be ethical. You believe morality has answers, that for every situation there's a right choice and wrong choice. And if you think hard enough, care deeply enough, try earnestly enough, you can find the right answer and act accordingly. The moral life is knowable, achievable, within your reach, if you're just good enough. But what if morality doesn't have clear answers? What if the right choice doesn't exist in many situations? What if being a good person requires doing bad things? If choosing well means choosing harm? If acting morally means violating moral principles? What if most significant moral questions are dilemmas, situations where every option is wrong in some way, where you must choose between evils, where being good is impossible? Tonight we explore 100 disturbing moral dilemmas. Not to solve them, they can't be solved. Not to find right answers, there are no right answers. But to sit with them, to feel their discomfort, to recognize that moral life is far more ambiguous, more contradictory, more impossible than you've been taught. The dilemmas disturb not because you don't know the answers, but because there are no answers. The disturbance is from recognizing that being a good person is harder, maybe impossible in ways you hadn't imagined. The comfort, if there is comfort, comes from releasing the belief that you can be morally pure. You can't. No one can. Moral life involves moral failure, moral compromise, moral ambiguity. You'll make choices you can't fully justify. You'll act in ways that violate principles you hold. You'll harm people while trying to help others. This isn't personal failing, it's the structure of moral life. The dilemmas are features, not bugs. And recognizing this is strange relief from believing you should achieve moral purity you can't achieve. This isn't nihilism. The dilemmas matter. The choices are real. The harm is actual. But the clarity is illusion. You've been taught that morality is clear. Do good, avoid evil, follow principles, be consistent. But moral life is murky. The dilemmas reveal this murkiness, and sitting with dilemmas, not solving them, just recognizing their impossibility, is rest from exhausting attempt to be perfectly good in a world that makes perfect goodness impossible. Let's begin. The trolley problem. The foundation of moral vertigo. A runaway trolley is heading toward 5 people tied to the tracks. You're standing at a switch. If you pull the lever, the trolley will divert to different track where 1 person is tied. You have 2 options, do nothing and 5 people die, or pull the lever and 1 person dies. What do? This is the trolley problem, most famous moral dilemma in philosophy. It seems simple. 5 deaths versus 1 death. The math is obvious. Pull the lever, save 5, sacrifice 1. This is consequentialism. Judge actions by consequences. Better consequences equal better action. 5 lives saved is better consequence than 1 life saved. Pull the lever. But pulling the lever means killing someone. You're taking action that directly causes death. The 1 person on the side track wasn't going to die. You killed them by pulling lever. Yes, you saved 5, but you killed 1. Is that morally acceptable? Can you kill innocent person to save others? The 1 person did nothing wrong. They don't deserve death. Yet you killed them. You're murderer. If you don't pull the lever, 5 people die. But you didn't kill them. The trolley killed them. You could have prevented their deaths, but you didn't cause them. There's moral difference between killing and letting die, isn't there? Killing is active harm. Letting die is passive failure to prevent harm. Surely actively killing someone is worse than passively allowing deaths to occur. Don't pull the lever. But that distinction seems suspicious. If you can save 5 lives and choose not to, aren't you responsible for their deaths? Your inaction caused outcome. You could have prevented 5 deaths with simple action. You chose not to act. 5 people died because of your choice. The fact that you didn't physically push the trolley doesn't eliminate your responsibility. You're as responsible for 5 deaths as you would be for 1 death. Pull the lever. The person facing trolley problem experiences moral vertigo. Every option seems right and wrong simultaneously. Pulling lever, right because saves more lives, wrong because kills innocent person. Not pulling lever, right because doesn't actively kill, Wrong because allows preventable deaths. Neither option is purely good. Both involve moral failure. You can't escape blame. Whatever you choose, you've done something wrong. This is what makes trolley problem disturbing. It's not that the right answer is hard to figure out. It's that there is no right answer. Every choice is compromised. You're going to fail morally regardless of choice. Some people will die, and you'll bear responsibility for those deaths. The question isn't what's the right choice, but which moral failure can you live with? Now complicate it. What if the one person on the sidetrack is someone you love? Your child, your partner, your parent? Do you still pull the lever? Most people say no. They won't sacrifice loved one to save strangers. But this means relationships matter more than consequences. The math changes when personal connection is involved. Saving 5 strangers is not worth sacrificing one loved one. But this violates consequentialism. 5 lives are 5 lives regardless of whose lives they are. Why does personal relationship change moral calculation? What if the 5 people are old, sick, near death anyway, and the one person is young, healthy, with full life ahead? Do you still pull the lever? If you're consequentialist, you might calculate future years of life, quality of life, potential contributions. Maybe one young, healthy person is worth more than 5 old, sick people in terms of total good. But this is disturbing calculation. Are some lives worth more than others? Does utility calculation justify choosing who lives and dies? Can you quantify human worth? What if the 5 people tied to tracks are murderers, and the one person on sidetrack is innocent child? Do you pull the lever now? Most people say no. Save the innocent child. Let the murderers die. But this means past actions determine worth. The murderers might have been redeemed, might have changed, might have had reasons for their actions. Does past moral failing justify present death? Can you judge who deserves to live based on moral character? What if you don't know anything about the 6 people? You can't see them clearly, don't know their ages, relationships, histories. You just know there are 5 on one track and 1 on another. Does the moral calculation change when you lack information? Should you make life and death decisions in ignorance? Or is the ignorance actually clarifying? When you don't know people personally, you can judge purely by numbers. The person trying to solve trolley problem realizes there is no solution. Every additional factor complicates rather than clarifies. Every moral principle conflicts with other moral principles. Consequentialism says save more lives. Deontology says don't kill. Virtue ethics asks what good person would do, but good people disagree. Care ethics says relationships matter. Justice says treat people equally. Every framework gives different answer. There is no coherent moral system that resolves dilemma. This is the foundation of moral vertigo. You can't be good because being good requires acting on principles that contradict each other. You want to maximize good consequences, but you also want to respect rights, follow duties, maintain relationships, act justly, be virtuous. These values conflict. You can't satisfy them all. Every action satisfies some values while violating others. Moral life is choosing which values to violate, not achieving perfect alignment of all values. The surgeon's dilemma. When saving lives requires killing your surgeon, 5 patients in your hospital are dying. Each needs different organ transplant to survive. Heart, lungs, kidneys, liver, pancreas. Without transplants, all 5 will die soon. No donor organs are available, but a healthy person walks into hospital for routine checkup. They're perfect match for all 5 patients. If you kill the healthy person, harvest their organs, you can save 5 lives. Do you kill 1 to save 5? Most people immediately say no. This is murder. You can't kill innocent person to harvest their organs, even if it saves 5 lives. The healthy person has rights. They came to hospital for help, not to be killed. Killing them violates medical ethics, violates trust, violates basic human rights. It's obviously wrong. Don't kill the healthy person. But this is structurally identical to trolley problem. 5 deaths versus 1 death. The math is same. If you pull lever in trolley problem, why won't you harvest organs in surgeon's dilemma? What's the moral difference? Both involve killing one to save five. Both involve acting to cause death of one person to prevent deaths of five people. Why does trolley problem feel different from surgeon's dilemma? The person considering both dilemmas searches for relevant difference. In trolley problem, all six people are already in danger. The threat exists independently of you. You're just redirecting existing threat. In surgeon's dilemma, you're creating the threat. The healthy person wasn't in danger until you decided to kill them. Maybe it's permissible to redirect existing threats, but not to create new threats. Pull lever, don't harvest organs. But this distinction is questionable. If outcome is same, one death, five lives saved, why does source of threat matter? Dead is dead, regardless of whether death comes from redirected trolley or surgeon's scalpel. Saved is saved, regardless of whether people are saved from trolley or from organ failure. Focusing on who created threat seems like avoiding the central question, is killing one to save five acceptable? What if we change surgeon's dilemma? The healthy person is dying anyway. They have terminal illness, days to live. They're still conscious, still capable of refusing. You could ask their permission. If they consent, can you harvest their organs to save five people? Most people say yes, with consent, it's acceptable. But this reveals that consent matters. Killing one to save five is acceptable if the one person consents. Without consent, it's murder. But consent didn't matter in trolley problem. The one person on sidetrack didn't consent to being killed. You didn't ask their permission before pulling lever. You sacrificed them without consultation. If consent matters for organ harvesting, why doesn't it matter for trolley diversion? Is it because in trolley problem you don't have time to ask? Does urgency eliminate need for consent? What if in surgeon's dilemma, the healthy person is unconscious? They came to hospital, were anesthetized for surgery, are currently unconscious on operating table. You could harvest their organs now. They can't consent, but they also can't refuse. They won't know what happened. The five patients will be saved. No one will know you murdered the unconscious person except you. Do you do it? Most people still say no. Even unconscious, the person has rights. Their inability to consent doesn't mean you can violate them. Murder is murder regardless of victim's consciousness. But this means you're willing to let five people die to preserve rights of one unconscious person. The five conscious people who want to live matter less than one unconscious person's right not to be killed. How do you justify this to the five people dying? The person trying to distinguish trolley problem from surgeon's dilemma realizes distinctions keep dissolving. Every difference they identify doesn't actually seem morally relevant when examined. Source of threat, consent, consciousness. These factors change intuitions but don't clearly change underlying moral calculation. You still face same choice, kill one, save five. The discomfort is that intuitions say pull lever, don't harvest organs, but reason can't find coherent justification for different responses. Maybe the difference is violating person's body. In trolley problem, you pull lever, you don't touch the person who dies. In surgeon's dilemma, you cut open person's body, remove their organs. Maybe there's special moral weight to bodily integrity. Maybe killing from distance is different from killing through direct bodily violation. But this seems arbitrary. Death is death. The person on sidetrack dies when trolley hits them. Their body is certainly violated by impact. The person whose organs are harvested dies from the harvesting. Their body is violated by surgery. Both involve bodily destruction. Why does method of bodily violation matter? And if it matters, how much does it matter? Is it worth five lives? What if surgeon's dilemma involved no bodily violation? What if you could push button that painlessly, instantly kills healthy person in their home, while simultaneously their organs materialize in hospital for transplant? Science fiction, but it eliminates bodily violation. You're killing from distance, just like pulling lever. Does this make it acceptable? Most people still say no. So bodily violation isn't the key difference. Something else is causing different intuitions. The person exhausted by these dilemmas starts to suspect there is no coherent moral framework that resolves them. Every principle works sometimes, fails other times. Every distinction seems relevant until examined. The moral intuitions are strong. Pull the lever, don't harvest organs, but the reasoning is absent. You feel certain about different responses, but can't justify the certainty. The discomfort is living with strong intuitions you can't rationally defend. The fat man variant. Getting your hands dirty. You're standing on footbridge over trolley tracks. Below, runaway trolley is heading toward 5 people tied to tracks. You can't reach the switch, but standing next to you on bridge is large person. If you push them off bridge, they'll fall onto tracks. Their large body will stop the trolley. 5 people will be saved. The large person will die. Do you push them? This is fat man variant of trolley problem. Same numbers, 5 versus 1. Same outcome, 5 saved, 1 dies. But almost everyone says don't push. This is clearly wrong. You can't push person to their death. Even to save 5 people, you can't physically push someone off bridge. Don't do it. But why not? What's morally different from pulling lever? In both cases, you take action that kills 1 person to save 5. In both cases, you're using 1 person's death as means to save others. In both cases, the 1 person is innocent. Why does pulling lever feel acceptable while pushing person feels like murder? The person comparing these variants notices the physical directness. Pulling lever is indirect. You pull lever. Lever diverts trolley. Trolley hits person on different track. Pushing person is direct. You push person, person falls, person stops trolley. The directness of contact seems to matter. You're literally putting your hands on person and pushing them to their death. This feels more like murder than pulling distant lever. But should physical directness matter morally? You're killing someone either way. The method direct push versus indirect lever pull doesn't change the fact that you chose to kill 1 person to save 5. Why should moral evaluation depend on how much physical contact is involved? Dead is dead. Saved is saved. The directness is morally irrelevant detail, isn't it? What if you don't literally push with your hands? What if there's button on bridge that opens trapdoor under large person? You push button, person falls through trapdoor onto tracks. Is this more acceptable than physically pushing? It's less direct. You're pushing button, not pushing person. But outcome is identical. Does adding mechanical intermediary step make killing acceptable? What if large person is wearing a harness attached to bridge? You can't push them, but you can cut harness strap. They'll fall onto tracks. Is cutting strap more acceptable than pushing? Again, less direct physical contact, but you're still taking action that causes their death to save 5 others. Does method of causing death matter if intention and outcome are same? The person trying to find morally relevant difference between lever and push realizes differences keep seeming arbitrary. Physical contact, directness, mechanical intermediaries. These change how action feels, but don't clearly change whether action is right. The discomfort is that moral intuition is strong. These scenarios feel different, but moral reasoning doesn't support the intuitive distinction. You feel certain pushing is worse than pulling lever, but you can't explain why in principled way. What if the large person is villain? They tied the 5 people to tracks in first place. They're standing on bridge watching, enjoying their victims' fear. You can push them off bridge, stop trolley, save victims, and kill the person actually responsible for the threat. Does this change the moral calculation? Most people find this more acceptable. But this means responsibility matters. Killing guilty person is different from killing innocent person. But in original trolley problem, none of the 6 people are responsible for trolley situation. They're all innocent bystanders. If you pull lever, you kill innocent person. If you push fat man who tied people to tracks, you kill guilty person. These aren't comparable scenarios. The guilt-innocence distinction is doing moral work. But this means consequentialist calculation, 5 versus 1, isn't the only relevant factor. Character and responsibility of persons involved matters too. What if large person on bridge is person who tied 5 people to tracks, but they're unconscious now? They passed out from excitement. You can push unconscious guilty person off bridge to save their 5 victims. Is this acceptable? They're guilty but unconscious. They can't defend themselves, can't resist, can't even know what's happening. Does unconsciousness change moral evaluation? Can you kill unconscious guilty person to save their intended victims? Most people say yes. Push the unconscious villain. But this reveals disturbing principle. You can kill people while they're unconscious if they deserve it. This opens questions about capital punishment, about killing in sleep, about whether consciousness matters for moral status. If it's acceptable to kill unconscious villain to save their victims, is it acceptable to kill sleeping murderer to prevent future murders? Where does this logic end? What if you're the large person on bridge? You realize your own body is large enough to stop trolley. You can jump off bridge yourself, sacrifice yourself to save 5 people. Do you have moral obligation to jump? Most people say no. You can jump if you choose, but you're not obligated to sacrifice yourself. But this means self-sacrifice is supererogatory. Good if you do it, not wrong if you don't. Yet pushing someone else is murder. Why is your life yours to keep, but someone else's life is yours to take for greater good? The person facing Fat Man variant experiences deep moral confusion. Every factor they examine seems relevant, but none provides clear resolution. Physical directness matters intuitively, but not rationally. Guilt matters, but creates more questions. Self-sacrifice is optional, but pushing others is forbidden. The principles don't cohere. The intuitions are strong, but unjustifiable. You're left with feeling that pushing is wrong. Pulling lever might be acceptable, but you can't explain the difference. The discomfort is living with moral certainty based on unclear principles. The torture dilemma. When preventing harm requires causing harm. Terrorist has planted bomb in crowded city. Bomb will explode in 2 hours, killing thousands. You've captured the terrorist. They know where bomb is but refuse to reveal location. You can torture the terrorist. The torture will be severe, painful, degrading, traumatizing, but it will probably make them reveal bomb location. You can save thousands of lives by torturing one person. Do you torture? This is torture dilemma. The stakes are enormous. Thousands of lives. The cost is high. Torturing human being. The math seems obvious. Torture one person, save thousands. The consequentialist calculation clearly favors torture. Don't torture is choosing to let thousands of innocent people die. How can you justify that choice? Torture. But torture is absolutely prohibited in civilized society. It's banned by international law, condemned by moral philosophers, rejected by decent people. Torture is treating person as mere means, violating their autonomy, destroying their dignity. No matter what they've done, torture is wrong. Human rights include right not to be tortured. This right is absolute. It doesn't disappear because torturing would prevent greater harm. Don't torture. The person facing torture dilemma is torn between consequences and principles. Consequences say torture, save thousands. Principles say don't torture, respect human rights. Absolutely. You can't satisfy both. Either thousands die, or you violate absolute prohibition on torture. Either way, you've failed morally. You've either let thousands die when you could have prevented it, or you've become torturer, violating person's fundamental rights. What if it's not terrorist, but someone who accidentally knows bomb location? They overheard terrorist planning, know where bomb is, but aren't personally responsible for it. They're refusing to help for their own reasons, fear of retaliation, political sympathies, whatever. Can you torture innocent person who possesses information needed to save thousands? Most people say no. Torture of innocent is clearly wrong, but this means responsibility matters. Torture of guilty may be acceptable, even though torture of innocent is not. But what makes terrorist guilty? They planted bomb, yes. But bomb hasn't exploded yet. They're guilty of conspiracy, of intent, of attempted mass murder, but not actual mass murder. You're trying to prevent that. If you torture them and they reveal location and bomb is defused, no one dies. The terrorist is guilty of intent, but not of completed act. Is intent enough to justify torture? Can you torture someone for crime they haven't yet succeeded in committing? What if terrorist is wrong about bomb location? They think they planted bomb at location A, but actually their accomplice moved it to location B. You torture terrorist, they reveal location A. You search there, no bomb, still 2 hours until explosion somewhere else. You've tortured person and gained nothing. Does uncertainty about whether torture will work change moral calculation? Can you torture when torture might not save anyone? The person considering uncertainty realizes torture dilemma, assumes perfect information. Torture will work, will reveal location, will save people. But real world has uncertainty. Torture might not work, person might not know actual location, might lie under torture, might die before revealing information. False information given under torture might waste time, prevent finding bomb. The consequentialist calculation depends on certainty that doesn't exist. If torture probably won't work, does consequentialist justification collapse? What if instead of one terrorist, you've captured their child? The child doesn't know bomb location, but terrorist loves child. You can torture child in front of terrorist. This will probably make terrorist reveal location to stop child suffering. Do you torture innocent child to manipulate guilty adult? The child has done nothing wrong. But torturing child might be more effective than torturing terrorist. Does effectiveness justify torturing innocent? Most people are horrified. Don't torture the child. Torturing innocent child is absolutely unacceptable, regardless of consequences. But this reveals commitment to protect innocence that might conflict with saving maximum lives. If torturing child would definitely save thousands of lives, and you refuse, you're letting thousands die to preserve one child's physical integrity. Is child's innocence worth thousands of lives? What if it's terrorist's child, but child is unconscious? You're not torturing child. Child is sedated, won't experience pain, won't know anything happened. But terrorist sees you preparing to torture their child. The psychological pressure might make terrorist reveal location. You're not actually harming child, just threatening to. Is threat of torture different from torture? Can you threaten what you wouldn't actually do to manipulate person into compliance? What if you can use truth serum instead of torture? Science fiction. But imagine you have drug that makes person tell truth without pain, without degradation, without lasting trauma. Person drinks it, reveals bomb location involuntarily but painlessly. Is this acceptable? It's not torture, no pain, but it violates autonomy. Person is forced to reveal information against their will. Does method matter if result is same, forcing person to reveal information? The person exhausted by torture dilemma realizes every modification creates new complications. Guilt, innocence, certainty, effectiveness, methods, alternatives. Every factor matters, but none clearly resolves dilemma. You can construct scenarios where torture seems justified and scenarios where torture seems abhorrent, and the factors distinguishing them don't follow coherent principles. The discomfort is wanting clear answer. Torture is always wrong, or torture is sometimes necessary, but facing ambiguity that prevents clear answer. What about the person doing the torturing? Even if torture is morally justified, someone has to do it. You're not just authorizing torture. You might have to torture yourself. Can you inflict severe pain on helpless person? Can you become torturer? Even if it's morally right, can you live with yourself after? The moral justification might exist, but the psychological cost might be unbearable. Who are you willing to become to save thousands of lives? The person imagining actually torturing someone feels sick. The abstract moral calculation, one person's suffering versus thousands of deaths, feels manageable. But the concrete reality, you causing terrible pain to human being in front of you, feels impossible. Maybe torture is theoretically justified, but practically unbearable. Maybe being good sometimes means doing things you can't actually do. The dilemma is recognizing that some morally right actions are psychologically impossible. The lifeboat dilemma. When resources are insufficient, lifeboat has capacity for 20 people. 21 people are trying to board. If all 21 board, lifeboat will sink and everyone will die. If 20 board and 1 is left in water, 20 will survive and 1 will die. You're in lifeboat. Do you prevent the 21st person from boarding? Do you push someone out? Who decides who lives? This is lifeboat dilemma. Variation on tragic choice. Resources insufficient for everyone. Someone must be excluded or everyone suffers. The math is clear. Better to have 20 survivors than 0 survivors. Someone must be left to die. But who? And how do you justify that choice? The person in life. Boat faces immediate choice. The 21st person is grabbing onto boat, trying to climb in. If you do nothing, they'll board, boat will sink. If you push them away, they'll drown, but 20 will survive. What do you do? The utilitarian calculation is obvious. Push them away, save 20. But pushing someone to their death feels like murder. You're actively killing them. Don't do it. But not acting means everyone dies, including the person you're trying to protect. Your refusal to push one person to their death results in 21 deaths, including theirs. Is that better? You preserved your moral purity. You didn't push anyone, but everyone died. Maybe getting your hands dirty to save 20 lives is better than staying clean while 21 people die. Push them. How do you choose who stays out? First come, first served. The first 20 people to reach boat survive. But this privileges faster swimmers, maybe advantages those who are geographically closer to boat. Is survival based on swimming speed fair? Random selection. Draw straws. Whoever gets short straw stays out. This is fair but arbitrary. Equal chance for everyone, but someone randomly selected for death. Age oldest stays out, maximizing life years saved. But this means older people are worth less. Merit, most valuable person survives. But who determines value? Whoever contributed most to society, has most dependents, has most to contribute in future. These are disturbing calculations. The person trying to choose fairly realizes there is no fair way to choose who dies. Every method has problems. First come, first served is not merit-based. Random selection is arbitrary. Age discriminates. Merit is subjective. Need is manipulable. Whatever method you choose, someone dies who might have survived under different method. The choice is necessarily arbitrary at some level. You're choosing who lives and who dies without adequate justification. This is playing God without God's knowledge or wisdom. What if the 21st person is child? Children are lighter. Maybe 20 adults and 1 child fit in boat without sinking. But if it's still too heavy, do you prioritize child? Most people say yes, save the child, exclude an adult. Children have more life ahead, haven't had their chance yet, are innocent. But this means age matters. Adult who dies has family, responsibilities, knowledge, relationships. Child is potential person. Why is potential life worth more than actual life? What if you're the one who should stay out? You're in boat. You're older, weaker, less valuable by some metric. You should be the one excluded. Do you have moral obligation to sacrifice yourself? Most people say no. You can choose to sacrifice yourself, but you're not obligated. But if you're not obligated to sacrifice yourself, why can you decide someone else should be sacrificed? What makes your judgment about their life legitimate when you don't apply same judgment to your own life? What if it's your child trying to board as 21st person? Do you let other 20 survive while your child drowns? Most parents say no. They save their child even if it means everyone dies. Parental love overrides utilitarian calculation. But this means relationships matter more than maximum lives saved. Saving your own child while letting 20 people die, including your child, is worse outcome than excluding your child and saving 20. Yet most people choose worse outcome. Morality gives way to love. The person facing impossible choice between child and strangers realizes moral theory and human emotion diverge. Theory says save 20, sacrifice your child. Emotion says save your child, let others die. You can't satisfy both. You'll either act morally and feel inhuman, or act humanly and feel immoral. Either way, you've failed. The dilemma reveals that being good sometimes requires being emotionally monstrous, or being emotionally intact requires being morally monstrous. What if there's chance boat won't sink with 21? Maybe it's rated for 20 but could hold 21 safely. Maybe it's 50-50 whether it sinks. Do you take the risk? If you risk and boat sinks, everyone dies, including the person you tried to save. If you don't risk and exclude someone who might have safely fit, you killed them unnecessarily. How do you make life and death decisions under uncertainty? What if no one gets to decide? Everyone fights for position in boat. Whoever is strongest, most ruthless, most willing to harm others gets spot. The weak drown. This is natural selection, survival of fittest. But it's also might makes right, which is morally abhorrent. Yet refusing to decide means this happens by default. Trying to be fair means taking responsibility for who lives and dies. Avoiding responsibility means violence decides. Neither option is acceptable. The person exhausted by lifeboat dilemma realizes its microcosm of resource allocation under scarcity. Society faces lifeboat dilemmas constantly. Healthcare rationing, immigration policy, welfare distribution, disaster relief, resources insufficient for everyone. Someone must be excluded or everyone suffers. How do you choose? And can you live with your choice knowing that under different prioritization scheme, different people would have survived? The discomfort is recognizing that every resource allocation scheme involves choosing who lives and who dies, and none are fully justifiable. The lying dilemma. When truth causes harm, someone you love is dying. They ask if they're dying. You know they are. Terminal illness, weeks to live. Telling truth will cause them anguish, fear, despair in their final days. Lying will allow them peace, false hope, denial. Do you tell truth and cause suffering, or lie and preserve comfort? This is lying dilemma. Truth is generally valuable. Respect for persons, autonomy, informed decision-making. But truth sometimes causes harm. Person you love is dying. Truth will torment them. Lie will comfort them. They'll die either way. Do you prioritize truth or comfort? The person facing dying loved one wants to tell truth. People have right to know reality of their situation. Dying person might want to say goodbyes, make arrangements, resolve conflicts, prepare for death. Lying denies them opportunity for meaningful closure. They're dying in false belief about their situation. This seems disrespectful, patronizing, autonomy violating. Tell truth. But what if person specifically doesn't want to know? They've said repeatedly they don't want bad news, don't want to confront mortality, prefer hopeful denial. Telling truth against their expressed wishes violates their autonomy in different way. They've chosen ignorance. Forcing truth on them disrespects their choice. Maybe lie respects their autonomy more than truth does. Don't tell truth. What if they haven't expressed preference? You don't know if they want truth or comfort. You have to guess. If you guess wrong and tell truth they didn't want to hear, you've caused unnecessary suffering. If you guess wrong and lied a person who wanted truth, you've betrayed their trust and denied them meaningful final days. The uncertainty makes choice harder. You might hurt them either way. The person deciding whether to lie realizes good motives don't resolve dilemma. You want to help, but helping might mean lying, which violates principle of honesty. Or helping might mean truth-telling, which causes suffering. You can't help without doing something apparently wrong. Either you're liar or you're inflictor of suffering. Pick your moral failure. What if you know lie will be discovered, person will deteriorate, will realize they're dying despite your reassurances. The lie will be exposed, then they die knowing you lied, betrayed their trust, perhaps wondering what else you lied about. Short-term comfort becomes long-term betrayal. Does certainty that lie will fail change whether you should lie? Can lies be justified only if they'll never be discovered? What if lying isn't about death, but about something else? Your friend asks if you like their artwork. You think it's terrible. Do you lie to preserve their feelings or tell truth and hurt them? This seems lower stakes than death, but same structure. Truth hurts. Lie protects feelings. How much does suffering matter when deciding whether to lie? Is it acceptable to lie to spare minor hurt feelings? If yes, where's the line? The person drawing distinctions between serious and trivial lies realizes categories blur. Lying about impending death is serious. Lying about bad artwork is trivial. But what about lying about job prospects, relationship problems, financial situation, mental health? These matter, but aren't death. Can you lie about serious but not death situations? Is there hierarchy of acceptable lies based on seriousness of situation and seriousness of consequences? What if lie benefits you, not them? You lie to dying person, not to spare them suffering, but to spare yourself difficult conversation. You're being coward, avoiding discomfort, rationalizing self-interest as mercy. This seems clearly wrong. Lying to help yourself is different from lying to help them. But how do you know your motives? Maybe you think you're helping them, but actually you're avoiding discomfort. Can you trust your own motives when deciding whether to lie? What if truth sometimes helps, even when painful? Person wants to die peacefully in denial. But if they knew truth, they could reconcile with estranged child, resolve old conflict, say important things. Lie preserves short-term peace but prevents meaningful resolution. Truth causes short-term pain but enables long-term meaning. How do you weigh immediate suffering against potential meaning? Who decides what's more valuable, comfort or closure? The person exhausted by lying dilemma realizes honesty is not simple virtue. Sometimes truth harms, sometimes lies help. The blanket rule, never lie, conflicts with minimized suffering. You can't obey both principles in cases where truth causes suffering. The dilemma is choosing which principle to violate, knowing you're failing by one standard regardless of choice. What about lies to protect third parties? Someone asks where your friend is. You know your friend is hiding from abusive ex-partner. If you tell truth, they're at my house. You endanger your friend. If you lie, I don't know, you protect them. Is lying to protect others from harm acceptable? Most people say yes. Protect your friend, lie to abuser. But this means lying is acceptable when stakes are high enough. Where's the line? What if someone asks you to lie for them? Your friend is job hunting, gives you as reference, asks you to lie about their qualifications. You know they're exaggerating skills, inflating achievements. If you tell truth, they won't get job they want. If you lie, you help them but compromise your integrity and potentially harm future employer. Do you lie to help friend or tell truth and let friend face consequences of their own exaggerations? What about lies of omission? You don't tell explicit lie, but you don't volunteer harmful truth either. Person assumes something false and you don't correct them. Is silence lying? Are you obligated to volunteer truth that will cause pain? Or can you let mistaken assumptions stand? Lies of omission feel less wrong than explicit lies, but consequences are same. Person believes false thing because you didn't tell truth. The person distinguishing between explicit lies and omissions realizes distinction might be rationalization. End result is same. Person deceived. Method differs. Explicit lie versus withheld truth. But is method morally relevant? You're still choosing to leave someone in false belief. You're still prioritizing other values over truth. The explicit omission distinction makes you feel less guilty, but doesn't change outcome. The sacrifice dilemma. When saving group requires losing individual, 10 people are trapped in cave with rising water. Exit is blocked by boulder. All 10 can't move boulder together. But if one person stays in cave to push boulder from inside while 9 push from outside, boulder will move and 9 can escape. The one person staying inside will drown. Do you ask for volunteer? Do you choose someone to sacrifice? Do you draw straws? Or do all 10 stay and die together? This is sacrifice dilemma. Someone must sacrifice themselves so others can live, or everyone dies. The math favors sacrifice. 9 lives saved is better than 0. But how do you choose who sacrifices? And can you force someone to sacrifice if they don't volunteer? The person in cave calls for volunteer. Someone needs to stay. We need volunteer. Maybe someone will volunteer. Brave person, self-sacrificing person. Person with less to live for. Person feeling guilty about something. Person wanting to die heroically. If someone volunteers, is sacrifice acceptable? They chose it freely. But did they really choose freely? Social pressure, guilt, moral expectation, these constrain choice. Volunteer might not be truly voluntary. What if no one volunteers? Silence. Everyone looking at each other. No one wants to die. Time is running out. Water rising. Do you choose someone? Pick the oldest, they've lived longest. Have fewer years ahead, but oldest objects, their remaining years are still valuable, still theirs. Pick youngest. Haven't contributed as much yet, haven't earned survival, but youngest objects, their potential matters. Whole life ahead. Pick randomly, draw straws. Whoever gets short straw stays. But random selection means good people might die while bad people survive. Merit should matter. How do you determine merit when trapped in cave? You don't know these people well. You know names, maybe professions, maybe some life details. You know one person is doctor, one is teacher, one is parent of 4 children. Do you weight lives by social value? Save doctor can help people, but teacher shapes future. Parent has dependence. There's no objective measure of worth. Whatever criterion you use, someone with different criterion would choose differently. The choice is arbitrary masked as rational. The person trying to choose who should sacrifice realizes they're playing God without qualification. You're not omniscient. You don't know who's more valuable, who's better person, who has more to contribute. You're not omnipotent. You can't save everyone, can only choose who dies. You're not omnibenevolent. Your choice reflects your biases, your values, your limitations. Yet you must choose. Someone must stay or everyone dies. The inadequacy of your judgment doesn't eliminate need to judge. What if you're the one with least to live for? You're older, single, no dependents, unfulfilling job. By utilitarian calculation, you should volunteer. Your survival adds less total good than others' survival. Do you have moral obligation to volunteer? Or is self-sacrifice supererogatory, praiseworthy if you do it, not blameworthy if you don't? The person considering volunteering feels terror and temptation. Terror of dying, drowning in dark cave alone while others escape. But also temptation of heroism, of meaningful death, of being remembered as self-sacrificing hero. The mixed motives complicate moral evaluation. Are you volunteering because it's right, or because you want to be hero? Does motivation matter if outcome is same? You die, 9 live. What if you trick someone into volunteering? You tell weaker person, I'll stay, you go, but actually you plan to escape with others, leaving weaker person behind. The weaker person stays, thinking you're staying too. You escape with others. They realize too late that you lied. They're alone. They drown. You saved your life through deception. Is this acceptable? You achieved goal, 9 survive, 1 dies, but through betrayal. What if groups form? 5 people band together, agree that one of the other 5 must sacrifice. They're stronger, can force weaker 5 to choose among themselves who stays. The unity of 5 against 5 means 5 have power to avoid sacrifice. This is might makes right, tribalism, group selfishness, but it works. The stronger group survives. Is survival through solidarity better or worse than individual sacrifice? The person watching groups form realizes cooperation can serve selfish ends. Working together to force others to sacrifice isn't virtuous cooperation, it's coordinated exploitation, but it's also rational self-preservation. Individuals acting alone are vulnerable. Groups protect members. Is forming protective groups acceptable, even if it means forcing sacrifice onto unprotected individuals? What if you're in the stronger group but disagree with forcing sacrifice on weaker group? You can break from stronger group, side with weaker group, even odds, but this means you might be chosen to sacrifice. Your moral principle might cost your life. Do principles matter enough to die for, or is principles-based self-sacrifice irrational? Should you compromise moral principles to preserve life? What if water rises so fast there's no time to deliberate? Instinct takes over. Whoever is nearest exit escapes. Whoever is furthest drowns. The situation resolves through position and speed, not through moral deliberation. Is this better or worse than choosing? No one bears responsibility for deaths, circumstances decided, but also no heroism, no meaningful choice, just panic and luck. Would you prefer deliberate choice or chaotic chance? The person escaping through panic feels guilty. Survivor's guilt, despite not choosing who died. They were just faster, better positioned. But people died. If situation had evolved slightly differently, they'd be the one drowning. The arbitrariness of survival creates guilt. They don't deserve survival more than others. They just lucked out. Can you feel grateful for survival that was morally arbitrary? The secret dilemma. When keeping confidence causes harm, your friend confides they're having an affair. Their spouse is your friend too. You know secret would devastate spouse. Your friend trusts you to keep secret. Do you keep confidence and let spouse remain deceived, or betray confidence and tell spouse truth? This is secret dilemma. Friendship involves trust, confidentiality, but keeping secret enables harm. Spouse is being betrayed, has right to know. The cheating friend is wronging spouse. Your silence makes you complicit, but your speech breaks trust. Either way, you're failing. Either failing friend who trusted you, or failing other friend by hiding truth about their spouse. The person holding secret feels burdened. They know something important, something harmful, something spouse should know, but they promised confidentiality. Friend trusted them. Breaking confidence betrays that trust, but keeping confidence betrays other friend who deserves to know truth. Every day of silence is day of choosing cheater over cheated, but revealing secret makes you betrayer too. What if friend confided because they're planning to end affair and confess? They needed to tell someone, chose you, planned to tell spouse themselves. If you tell spouse first, you've preempted friend's planned confession, caused unnecessary double betrayal. But if you wait and friend doesn't confess, you've allowed deception to continue. How long do you wait? How do you know friend will actually confess? What if affair is over? Friend had affair, ended it, feels guilty, confided in you. Telling spouse about ended affair serves no purpose except to hurt spouse. The harm is past. Knowledge would only create pain without preventing future harm. Is causing pain for no benefit acceptable? Or does spouse have right to know even if knowledge only hurts them? The person weighing past versus present harm realizes timing matters. Ongoing affair is continuing harm that spouse might want to stop. Past affair is historical fact that spouse might prefer not to know. But how do you decide for someone else what they'd prefer to know? Maybe spouse would want to know even about past affair. Maybe spouse values truth over comfort. Maybe spouse would feel doubly betrayed learning about past affair years later, both the affair and the years of your silence. What if affair is with someone spouse works with? Spouse sees affair partner daily, treats them as trustworthy colleague, doesn't know they're sleeping with their spouse. The deception is ongoing in workplace. Spouse is friendly with person betraying them. This makes deception feel more cruel. Spouse is unknowingly nice to person betraying them. Does extent of deception increase your obligation to reveal truth? What if revealing secret will destroy more than marriage? Friend who's having affair will lose spouse, children's respect, job perhaps if affair is with colleague, reputation in community. Your revelation creates cascade of harm. Yes, they deserve consequences of their actions, but you're the one causing consequences. Can you live with destroying friend's life, even if they brought it on themselves by choosing to confide in you? The person imagining consequences of revelation feels overwhelmed. Telling truth will cause divorce, split family, hurt children who don't deserve any of this, create financial hardship, social shame, professional damage. The truth will set off chain reaction of suffering. Are you responsible for all that suffering? Friend made choices that created situation, but you're choosing whether to trigger consequences. How much responsibility do you bear for choosing to reveal truth? What if spouse asks you directly, is friend having affair? Now you must choose between explicit lie and revelation. Silence was passive complicity. Lying is active deception. Or you can tell truth, which breaks confidence but answers direct question. Most people feel more obligated to answer direct question than to volunteer information. But morally, is there difference? Either way, spouse deserves truth. Either way, you're breaking confidence if you tell. Does directness of question change your obligation? What if friend is your sibling and spouse is not close to you? Family loyalty versus honesty to acquaintance. Most people prioritize family, keep siblings secret, let acquaintance remain deceived. But this means relationship proximity determines moral obligation. You owe more to people closer to you. But objective morality says everyone deserves truth. Spouse's right to know shouldn't depend on how close you are to them, yet it does in practice. The person feeling torn between family and outsider realizes morality and loyalty conflict. Morality says tell truth. Loyalty says protect family. You can't do both. Culture says family comes first, blood is thicker than water. But spouse is victim here. Family loyalty means protecting person doing wrong at expense of person being wronged. How do you justify that? What if secret is not affair but crime? Friend confides they committed crime, embezzlement, hit and run, drug dealing. Do you keep confidence? Friend trusted you, but crime harms others. Someone is victim of embezzlement. Someone is injured in hit and run not knowing who hit them. Drug dealing might harm addicts. Does criminality change whether you can keep confidence? Is immoral secret different from illegal secret? What if secret is planned for future harm? Friend confides they're planning to do something harmful, cheat on taxes, sabotage colleague, have affair. The harm hasn't occurred yet. Can you prevent harm by breaking confidence? Should you? Friend has done nothing wrong yet, except plan. But preventing harm might require preemptive trust breaking. Do you break confidence to prevent planned harm, or do you wait until harm occurs before deciding whether to break confidence? The person holding secret about planned harm feels preventive responsibility. They know something bad will happen. They can stop it by breaking confidence. But friend hasn't acted yet. Maybe friend will change mind. Maybe confession is way of working through temptation. Breaking confidence might prevent harm that would never occur anyway. But not breaking confidence risks allowing preventable harm. The uncertainty makes choice impossible. The justice dilemma. When punishing guilty harms innocence. Man committed terrible crime 20 years ago. He's never been caught, but he's completely changed, remorseful, reformed, built good life, helps others, has family who depends on him. You discover his identity. Do you report him to police? Justice demands punishment. But punishment will harm his innocent family. His past crime deserves consequence, but present good life deserves protection. What do you do? This is justice dilemma. Justice is generally valuable. Wrongdoing should be punished. Victims deserve satisfaction. Rules must be enforced. But punishment sometimes harms innocent people. Man's children didn't commit crime. They're innocent. But punishing their father destroys their family. Justice for victim versus harm to innocent family members. The person discovering criminal identity believes in justice. Crime was terrible, violent assault, permanent harm to victim. Perpetrator escaped consequence. Victim never got justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. The man should face consequences regardless of time passed or life reformed. Report him to police. Let justice be done though heavens fall. But man has children now. Reporting him means father goes to prison. Children lose father, lose financial support, suffer shame and trauma. They did nothing wrong. Why should they suffer for father's crime? Punishing guilty shouldn't require punishing innocent, yet it does. Family members always suffer when loved one is punished. Does that mean we should never punish anyone with family? That can't be right. The person weighing victim's justice against children's welfare feels impossible tension. Victim suffered greatly, deserves to see perpetrator punished, but children will suffer greatly if father is imprisoned. Choosing victim's justice means causing children suffering. Choosing children's welfare means denying victim's justice. Neither choice is purely good. Someone suffers regardless. What if victim doesn't want perpetrator punished anymore? Victim has moved on, doesn't need justice, just wants to forget. Does victim's forgiveness eliminate your obligation to report crime? Crimes are offenses against society, not just against individual victims. Society has interest in punishment regardless of victim's wishes, but if victim doesn't want punishment, who are you serving by reporting crime? Abstract justice? State authority? Your own moral principles? What if crime was murder and victim can't forgive because they're dead? Family of victim might want justice, or might prefer perpetrator live free rather than drag everyone through trial. How much weight do victims' families' wishes carry? Murder is crime against person who can't speak for themselves. Does their death give family authority to decide about punishment? Or does society's interest in justice outweigh family preferences? The person imagining murder victim's family realizes different family members might want different outcomes. Victim's spouse wants perpetrator punished. Victim's children want everyone to move on. Victim's parents want public trial and maximum sentence. Whose wishes prevail? Victim can't decide, and family disagrees. You must choose without clear guidance from those most affected by crime. What if reformed man is now saving lives? He's doctor, firefighter, relief worker, someone whose work helps many people. Imprisoning him means people he would have helped die or suffer. Is present good work relevant to past crime? Can you balance lives saved now against harm caused then? This is disturbing calculation, using current utility to excuse past crime. But if justice means maximizing welfare, current life-saving work might outweigh past harm. What if man will die soon anyway? Terminal illness, months to live. Prosecuting dying man seems pointless. Punishment serves retribution, deterrence, rehabilitation. Dying man needs no rehabilitation, can't deter others. Retribution against dying man is hollow, but victim might need symbolic justice even if practical purposes of punishment don't apply. Does terminal illness eliminate need for justice, or does justice transcend practical considerations? The person facing imminent death of reformed criminal feels urgency. If you don't report soon, man dies unpunished. Justice will be permanently denied. But also man is dying. He'll suffer from disease. Adding prison to final months seems cruel, but crime victims suffered too. Why does his suffering matter more than theirs? Because suffering is present versus past? Because terminal illness evokes sympathy? These seem like morally arbitrary factors. What if statute of limitations has expired? Legally, you can't prosecute, but morally, crime was still committed. Do legal limits affect moral obligation to report? Legal system says some crimes become unprosecutable after time passes. This reflects practical limits and forgiveness. But victims' harm doesn't expire. Moral wrong doesn't depend on legal enforceability. Should you report crime that can't be legally prosecuted just to make public record of what happened? What if crime was committed when perpetrator was child? Juvenile offense. Terrible, but committed by person who was legally and developmentally not fully responsible. Adult reformed man isn't same person as child who committed crime. People change, children become adults. The continuity of identity is debatable. Is adult responsible for child's actions? Most legal systems recognize diminished responsibility for juvenile offenses. Does this apply morally too? The person considering child offender realizes identity over time is philosophically complex. Man at 40 is different from child at 13. Different brain, different values, different person in many ways, but also same continuous consciousness, same body, same history. The child who committed crime grew into adult before you. At what age does person become new person who isn't responsible for child's actions? Or does responsibility persist across time regardless of personal change? What if reporting crime means victim is traumatized again? Victim will be forced to testify, relive assault, face perpetrator. Victim would prefer not to go through this. Reporting crime serves abstract justice but causes concrete harm to victim who doesn't want justice pursued. Do you report anyway? Is justice valuable enough to traumatize victim against their wishes? Or does victim's preference not to be re-traumatized outweigh justice? The person watching reformed criminal help community feels cognitive dissonance. Here is person who did terrible thing and is now doing wonderful things. Reporting them stops wonderful things and dredges up terrible thing. Not reporting them allows wonderful things to continue, but leaves terrible thing unpunished. The logic says report. Past crime overrides present virtue. But heart says don't report. Present good life has value. The conflict between justice and mercy is irresolvable. The distribution dilemma. When fair means harmful, you have medicine for 5 people. 6 people need it to survive. If you divide medicine equally, everyone gets too little, all 6 die. If you give medicine to 5, those 5 survive, 1 dies. Do you divide fairly and everyone dies? Or distribute unfairly and maximum people survive? This is distribution dilemma. Fairness demands equal treatment. Utility demands maximum survival. You can be fair or effective, not both. Equal distribution feels morally right. Everyone treated same, no discrimination, procedural justice. But equal distribution means everyone dies. Unequal distribution feels morally wrong, some favored over others, arbitrary choice about who lives. But unequal distribution means maximum survival. The person holding medicine wants to be fair. Everyone deserves medicine equally. Their needs are same. All will die without medicine. Their worth is same. All are human beings deserving equal treatment. Dividing equally treats everyone as equals. Even though everyone dies, at least you are fair. Divide equally. But fairness that kills everyone seems perverse. Justice is good, but survival is better. The purpose of medicine is to save lives. Giving everyone medicine that saves no one defeats medicine's purpose. Better to save some than to save none fairly. Give medicine to 5, accept unfairness. How do you choose which 5? Random selection. Draw straws, coin flips, whatever. This is procedurally fair, even if outcome is unequal. Everyone has equal chance. Chance decides who lives. No one can complain about bias or favoritism. Random selection combines fairness with effectiveness, but random selection means good people might die while bad people survive. Surely merit should matter. Save most deserving 5. Who is most deserving? Most morally good? How do you judge? Most socially useful? By what metric? Most likely to contribute to future? Based on what evidence? Youngest? Most life remaining? But experience and relationships matter too. Most dependents, most people relying on them. But this punishes childless people. Every criterion for deserving is debatable, biased, discriminatory. Merit is not objective. Choosing by merit means imposing your values on life and death decision. The person trying to choose fairly realizes all fairness mechanisms are flawed. Equal distribution is fair but deadly. Random distribution is procedurally fair but morally arbitrary. Merit distribution is substantively fair but subjectively defined. There is no distribution method that is both fair and effective and objective and humane. Whatever method you choose, someone dies, who might have lived under different method, and you have inadequate justification for why your method is right. What if the 6 people have been contributing different amounts to group survival? 5 people hunt, gather, build shelter. 1 person does nothing, lazy, refuses to help, free rides on others' work. Do you give medicine to 5 workers and let free rider die? This seems just. Workers deserve reward for contribution. Free rider deserves consequence for laziness. But medicine is for survival, not reward. Should survival depend on past contribution? Is healthcare something you earn through good behavior? What if free rider is not lazy but disabled? Can't hunt due to injury, can't gather due to illness, can't build due to lack of strength. They're not free riding, they're incapable. Do you give them medicine? Most people say yes. Disability is not moral failing, just bad luck. But this means ability affects desert. Able-bodied person who doesn't contribute doesn't deserve medicine. Disabled person who can't contribute does deserve medicine. The ability to contribute determines worthiness, not actual contribution. Is this fair? The person considering disability realizes capacity matters morally. We hold people responsible for what they can control, not for what they can't. Lazy, able-bodied person is culpable for not contributing. Disabled person is not culpable for inability to contribute. But this complicates desert-based distribution. You need to assess not just contribution but capacity, and capacity is variable, contextual, hard to measure. Some people are trying their best, but capacity is limited. Others are capable but not trying. How do you distinguish? What if you're one of the 6? Do you include yourself in distribution decision? This seems right. You're equal to others, but this means you might choose yourself to die to be fair to others. Can you sacrifice yourself through your own distribution decision? Most people would exclude themselves from fair distribution to save others, but this means person making distribution decision gets special status. They decide for others but opt out themselves. Is that fair? What if you give medicine to 5 and the 6th person steals some? You wake up and medicine is gone. 6th person took some from sleeping survivors. Now everyone has insufficient dose. All 6 die, including thief. The attempted unfairness destroyed the achieved fairness. Thief tried to save themselves but killed everyone. Do you punish attempted theft, even though thief died too? What does punishment mean when thief is dead? Is anger at dead thief rational? The person angry at thief who killed everyone through selfishness feels justified rage. Thief's action was immoral, destroyed optimal solution, killed 5 people who would have survived. But thief was desperate, dying, trying to survive. From their perspective, they were excluded unfairly. They acted to save themselves. The theft was selfish but understandable. Can you condemn someone for trying to survive, even if their method was wrong? What if instead of 6 people, it's 6 groups? 5 groups of 10 people each, 1 group of 10 people. 50 people in 5 groups get medicine. 10 people in 6 group die. This changes moral mathematics. Now you're choosing to sacrifice 10 to save 50. The math is clearer, 50 lives versus 10 lives, but 10th group is still being excluded. From their perspective, they're sacrificed for majority's benefit. The group-level utilitarianism doesn't feel different to individuals being sacrificed. What if distribution is repeated over time? This month you have medicine for 5 out of 6. Next month you'll have medicine for 5 out of 6 again. If you rotate who gets medicine, everyone survives some months and dies other months. But rotating means everyone gets inconsistent treatment. Sometimes you save them, sometimes you don't. Would consistent allocation to same 5 be better? At least 5 people survive reliably. Rotation seems fair, but creates chronic uncertainty for everyone. The person managing distribution over time realizes repeated dilemmas create policy questions. One-time choice between 5 and 6 is tragic but finite. Repeated choice creates system. Do you establish policy? First come, first served. Oldest excluded, random each time, rotation. Every policy has flaws. First come favors the fast. Age exclusion discriminates. Random creates chronic anxiety. Rotation means no one survives with certainty. There is no good system for repeated insufficient resource allocation. The promising dilemma. When keeping promises causes harm, you promised your dying friend you'd care for their alcoholic adult child. Your friend dies. The child is manipulative, abusive toward you, refuses help, wastes resources. Keeping promise requires sacrificing your well-being to support someone who won't help themselves. Breaking promise means abandoning commitment to dead friend. Do you keep promise at great cost, or break promise to protect yourself? This is promising dilemma. Promises are morally binding. You gave your word, made commitment, created obligation. But promises sometimes require sacrifices you didn't anticipate. When you promised, you didn't know how difficult it would be. Now you know. Does new knowledge release you from promise? Or is promise binding regardless of difficulty? The person keeping promise feels trapped. They promised friend they'd care for child. Friend trusted them, died believing child would be cared for. Breaking promise betrays dead friends' trust, but child is making their life miserable. The care they provide is not appreciated, not effective, not sustainable. They're sacrificing their well-being for someone who doesn't want help and won't improve. The promise is destroying them. But promises are meant to be difficult. If promises only bound you when convenient, they wouldn't be promises, they'd be preferences. Promise is commitment regardless of convenience. You knew care might be difficult. You promised anyway. Now difficulty has arrived and you want to break promise because it's hard. But that's exactly when promises matter most, when keeping them costs you something. What if you didn't understand what you were promising? Friend described child as needing support. You imagined occasional help, emotional support, some financial assistance. You didn't know child was deeply alcoholic, abusive, refusing help. If you'd known, you wouldn't have promised. Does misunderstanding of promises' requirements release you from promise, or is promise binding regardless of whether you understood what you were agreeing to? The person claiming misunderstanding realizes this might be rationalization. Maybe friend did describe child accurately, but you didn't listen carefully. Maybe you heard need support and imagined easy version. Maybe your failure to understand isn't friend's fault. If your misunderstanding is your responsibility, does that strengthen the promise's binding power? You should have asked more questions before promising. Your failure to do so doesn't release you from promise. What if keeping promise requires harming third parties? You're spending time and money on friend's child. This means less time and money for your own family. Your children receive less attention because you're fulfilling promise to dead friend. Your spouse is frustrated by your commitment to someone else's child. Is promise to dead friend more important than responsibility to living family? How do you balance competing obligations? What if friend's child explicitly releases you from promise? I know you promised my parent you'd help me, but I don't want your help. You're released from promise. Does promisee's child have authority to release you? They're not party to promise. Promise was between you and friend, but they're the subject of promise. If they don't want the promised care, is providing care against their wishes fulfilling promise or violating their autonomy? The person released by unwilling recipient feels relief and guilt. Relief because exhausting care can end. Guilt because they feel like they're escaping responsibility through technicality. Friend wanted child cared for. Child refuses care. Does refusal release you from promise, or should you care for unwilling recipient to honor dead friend's wishes? Can you keep promise to deceased person by forcing help on unwilling living person? What if friend extracted promise through manipulation? On deathbed, friend guilted you. If you don't promise to care for my child, I'll die knowing they'll be abandoned. You wouldn't let that happen, would you? The pressure was enormous. You promised under duress. Does promise extracted through emotional manipulation carry full moral weight, or is coerced promise less binding than freely given promise? What if you made conflicting promises? You promised dying friend you'd care for their child, but you also promised your spouse you'd prioritize your family. Both promises made sincerely, now they conflict. You can't keep both. Which promise takes priority? Earlier promise, more important relationship, greater need. Whatever criterion you use, you're breaking promise. You can't be trustworthy to everyone. You must choose which promise to betray. The person with conflicting promises realizes promise-keeping is not simple virtue. Making promises is easy. Keeping promises when they don't conflict is manageable. But keeping promises when they conflict with each other or with well-being or with other responsibilities is impossible. You must break some promise. Being good promise keeper means choosing which promises to break. The integrity you sought through promise keeping is compromised by the breaking that promise keeping requires. What if promise was to dead person who can't release you? Living promise can say, I release you from your promise. Dead promise can't. You're bound to promise to someone who can't modify it, can't acknowledge changed circumstances, can't release you. Does death of promise create eternal binding? Or does inability of deceased to release you mean you can release yourself when circumstances change drastically? What if dead person would want you released if they knew how things turned out? Friend would not want you to sacrifice your well-being and family for their child if they knew full situation. They'd say, forget the promise, take care of yourself. But friend is dead. You're speculating about what they'd want. How do you know? You're interpreting dead person's values to release yourself from uncomfortable obligation. Is this honest evaluation or self-serving rationalization? The person imagining dead friend's wishes realizes they're constructing permission to break promise. If friend knew truth, they'd release me. Maybe true, maybe false. Convenient that your interpretation of dead friend's values aligns with your desire to break promise. But maybe interpretation is accurate. Friend was reasonable person. Reasonable person wouldn't want promise kept at impossible cost. But you're judging reasonableness according to your standards. The interpretation is contaminated by self-interest. What if you can partially keep promise? Instead of caring for child directly, you pay for treatment program. You fulfill obligation without sacrificing your well-being. This seems like compromise. Honor spirit of promise without impossible burden. But friend wanted you to personally care for child, not just fund professional care. Substituting professional care for personal care changes the promise. Is modified promise-keeping acceptable? Or is it just promise-breaking disguised as compromise? The competing goods dilemma. When two rights make wrong. Your teenager wants to quit school to pursue music career. They're talented, passionate, have opportunity with recording studio. But they're 16. No education backup, no life experience, potentially sacrificing future for dream that might fail. Do you forbid them and restrict their autonomy? Or allow them and potentially enable their future failure? This is competing goods dilemma. Autonomy is good. People should control their lives. Protection is good. Parents should prevent harm to children. You can honor autonomy by allowing choice you think is wrong, or honor protection by forbidding choice you think is harmful. You can't honor both. Either you restrict freedom or you permit mistake. The conflict is between two goods. The person facing rebellious teenager wants to respect their autonomy. Teenager has dreams, passions, plans. They're old enough to have preferences about their life. Forcing them to continue school violates their self-determination. You'd be controlling their life according to your values, not theirs. Good parenting means respecting growing autonomy. Let them pursue music, but teenager is 16. Brain not fully developed. Can't anticipate long-term consequences. Doesn't understand how hard music industry is. You have wisdom from experience. You know most musicians don't succeed. You know education provides backup. You see disaster approaching. Good parenting means protecting children from their own bad decisions. Forbid music career, require school. The person weighing autonomy against protection realizes age matters. Baby has no autonomy. Parents decide everything. Adult has full autonomy. Parents don't decide anything. Teenager is in between. Some autonomy, some parental authority. But where's the line? At what age does child's preference override parents' judgment? At what age does protection become control? The line is blurry, contested, changing. What if teenager is unusually mature, thoughtful, responsible, understanding of risks? They've researched industry, made plans, shown good judgment generally. Does maturity lower the age when autonomy should be respected? Or is 16 too young regardless of maturity? Brain development is biological, not dependent on individual maturity. Does biology or psychology determine when person deserves autonomy? What if you forbid music and teenager rebels, runs away, pursues music anyway without your support? Now you've lost influence and relationship. They're pursuing music in worse circumstances because you forbade it. Your protective restriction backfired. Should you have given permission knowing they'd do it anyway? Or does that mean letting manipulation work? If child will do forbidden thing anyway, should parent permit it to maintain involvement? The person seeing child rebel despite forbidding realizes control is limited. You can forbid, but you can't prevent. Teenager will pursue music with or without permission. Forbidding doesn't stop them, it just adds conflict. Maybe autonomy should be granted, not because it's right, but because fighting it is futile. But permitting something because control failed is different from permitting because it's right. Are you respecting autonomy or admitting defeat? What if you allow music and child fails? At 25, they're unemployed, uneducated, bitter about wasted years. They blame you. You should have stopped me. Your parent, you should have known better. They held you responsible for protecting them, even though you respected their autonomy. Now they face consequences of their choice and resent you for not preventing those consequences. Did you fail them by respecting their autonomy? What if you forbid music and child resents you? At 30, they're educated, employed, but bitter. You killed my dream. I could have been successful. You stopped me. They hold you responsible for their unfulfilled life. You protected them from potential failure, but created actual resentment. The life you preserved for them feels empty because it's not life they chose. Did you fail them by restricting their autonomy? The person facing resentment either way realizes parents can't win. Respect autonomy and child might fail, blame you. Restrict autonomy and child might succeed, resent you. Either way, child might hold you responsible for outcome you influenced. Being good parent doesn't guarantee grateful children. You make best judgment with imperfect information. Child later has perfect information about actual outcome and judges your past choice accordingly. The judgment is unfair but inevitable. What if there's compromise? Teenager takes year off for music with condition that they return to school if music doesn't work. This respects autonomy while building in protection, but year off might become 2 years, 5 years. The condition might not be honored. Compromise sounds good but might be delaying inevitable conflict rather than resolving it. What about role of expertise? You're not music industry expert. Maybe teenager knows music industry better than you. You're projecting your ignorance of industry onto their decision. They know things about music path that you don't. Should you defer to their knowledge about their field even though they're young? Or does your general life wisdom override their specific music knowledge? The person considering expertise realizes both parent and child have partial knowledge. Parent knows world generally but not music specifically. Child knows music specifically but not world generally. Neither has complete knowledge for wise decision. Decisions requiring both general and specific knowledge can't be made wisely by either party alone. But decision must be made. Someone must decide without complete knowledge. Who decides when both parties have incomplete but different knowledge? What if choice is irreversible? Some opportunities come once. Delaying means losing opportunity forever. Music studio offer is now. Delay means offer disappears. This adds urgency to autonomy argument. But life is long, and irreversible choices at 16 affect decades of future. This adds urgency to protection argument. The irreversibility cuts both ways. Missing opportunity is irreversible. Making wrong choice is irreversible. How do you decide when both options are irreversible? The whistleblowing dilemma. When exposing wrong creates wrong. You discover your employer is committing fraud. Large-scale, systematic, harming customers. Reporting fraud is right. Illegal activity should be stopped. Victims deserve protection. Wrongdoing should be exposed. But reporting will cost you your job, career, maybe legal liability. Your family depends on your income. Do you report fraud and sacrifice your security, or stay silent and protect your family? This is whistleblowing dilemma. Exposing wrong is good. Society needs people willing to report corruption, but exposing wrong often harms whistleblower. You're choosing between doing right thing and protecting yourself, between public good and private welfare. You want to be good person and secure person. You can't be both. The person discovering fraud feels moral obligation to report. Customers are being defrauded. Company is breaking law. The fraud is significant, systemic, ongoing. Someone should stop it. Your position to stop it. Moral duty is clear. Report the fraud. But reporting means retaliation. Company will fire you, blacklist you in industry, maybe sue you. You'll lose job, income, career. You have family, mortgage responsibilities. Reporting fraud sacrifices all this. Can you sacrifice family security for moral principles? But staying silent makes you complicit. You know about fraud and choose to hide it. Customers continue being harmed. Company continues breaking law. Your silence enables wrong. You're protecting wrongdoers by not exposing them. Can you live with yourself knowing you chose family security over stopping harm to others? Your silence has victims, customers who wouldn't be defrauded if you reported. The person weighing family against strangers realizes proximity matters emotionally. Your family's concrete welfare matters more to you than strangers' abstract harm. You know your family, love them, feel responsible for them. Customers are unknown, distant, hypothetical to you. The emotional pull of protecting known loved ones overwhelms the rational argument for protecting unknown victims. But emotional pull is not moral justification. Why should proximity determine moral obligation? What if fraud is minor? Small overcharges, technical violations, minimal customer harm. The illegality is clear, but impact is small. Does scale of fraud affect whistleblowing obligation? If fraud costs customers pennies versus dollars versus thousands, does this change whether you should report? Proportionality seems relevant. Risking career to stop minor fraud seems excessive. But law is law. Minor fraud is still fraud. If minor illegality doesn't require reporting, what's the threshold? What if you report internally first? Tell management about fraud. Maybe management doesn't know. Maybe they'll fix it once informed. If they fix it, problem solved without external reporting, without retaliation. But if they don't fix it, you've revealed yourself as troublemaker. They'll watch you, limit your access, maybe fire you before you can report externally. Internal reporting gives company chance to fix wrong, but also chance to punish you. Is internal reporting ethical obligation before external reporting, or does it just increase risk while decreasing effectiveness? The person reporting internally finds management knew about fraud, approved of it, is participating in it. Management threatens you, report externally, and you'll be sued, blacklisted, destroyed professionally. The threat is real, credible. Management has resources, lawyers, power. You have principles, limited savings, family depending on you. The threat changes calculation. Before, reporting meant losing job. Now reporting means lawsuit, career destruction, possibly financial ruin. Does increased cost release you from obligation to report? What if you can report anonymously? Hotline, regulatory agency, media, various ways to report without identifying yourself. Anonymous reporting reduces personal risk, but also reduces credibility. Anonymous tipsters are less trusted than identified whistleblowers. The fraud might not be investigated seriously if report is anonymous. Effective whistleblowing might require putting your name to accusations, but putting your name means accepting retaliation. Is effective whistleblowing worth the cost, or is ineffective anonymous reporting sufficient to discharge moral obligation? What if reporting won't stop fraud? Company will pay fine, continue operating, maybe be more careful about getting caught. Regulators are weak, enforcement is lax, penalties are cost of doing business. You sacrifice career to report fraud that continues anyway. The utilitarian calculation is negative. You're harmed greatly. Customers are helped minimally. Does ineffectiveness of whistleblowing release you from obligation to blow whistle? Or is reporting right regardless of whether it stops wrong? The person imagining ineffective whistleblowing feels discouraged. Martyrdom for no benefit is pointless sacrifice. If reporting won't help customers, why report? Just to feel morally pure? That's self-serving. You're sacrificing family's welfare for your moral satisfaction. But not reporting because you doubt effectiveness might be rationalization. Maybe reporting will help more than you expect. Maybe you underestimate effectiveness to justify not reporting. How do you know whether reporting will work without trying? What if other employees are also considering reporting? If you don't report, maybe they will. You're not only person who could blow whistle. If someone else does it, fraud gets exposed without you sacrificing anything. Is waiting for someone else to report acceptable? Or is this free riding, hoping others take risks so you don't have to? If everyone waits for someone else to report, no one reports. But why should you sacrifice when others might do it? What if you wait and no one else reports? You chose not to report, hoping someone else would. Time passes, no one reports. Fraud continues, more customers harmed. Now you face original choice again, but with added guilt. You had chance to stop this earlier, didn't take it. More harm occurred. Does this retrospective view change whether you should have reported initially, or is judging past choice based on unknown future unfair? The person living with unreported fraud feels chronic moral discomfort. Every day you go to work knowing about fraud, participating in fraudulent system, accepting salary from illegal activity. You become accustomed to it. Cognitive dissonance decreases over time. The fraud feels normal, but accommodation to wrong is moral corruption. You're slowly becoming person who accepts fraud as acceptable. The day you discovered fraud, you were outraged. Years later, you barely think about it. Has the wrong changed? Or have you? What if fraud is discovered without you reporting? Investigation happens. Fraud is exposed. Company is punished. You're relieved. Right outcome without personal cost. But also guilty. You knew and didn't report. Others reported or discovered it independently. Your silence is now part of record. Investigators ask, did you know about fraud? You must choose between lying, I didn't know, or admitting, I knew but didn't report. The day of reckoning comes even if you don't bring it. What do you say? The violence dilemma. When preventing harm requires causing harm, someone is violently attacking innocent person in front of you. You can stop attack by using violence yourself, hitting attacker, restraining them forcefully. Using violence will prevent greater violence, but using violence is generally wrong. Do you use violence to prevent violence, or do you refuse violence absolutely and allow attack to continue? This is violence dilemma. Pacifism says never use violence. Violence is wrong regardless of circumstances. Consequentialism says prevent greater harm. Using small violence to prevent large violence is justified. You can be principled pacifist or effective violence preventer. You can't be both. The conflict is between absolute principle and situational consequences. The person facing violent attack feels instinct to intervene. Someone is being hurt. You can stop it. Using force against attacker prevents greater harm to victim. This is defensive violence. Violence used to defend innocent person from harm. Surely defensive violence is different from aggressive violence. Hitting someone to stop them from hurting others is morally different from hitting someone to hurt them. Use defensive violence to stop attack. But violence is violence. Once you decide some violence is acceptable, where do you draw a line? If defensive violence is acceptable, what about preemptive violence? If you know someone will attack innocent person tomorrow, can you violently prevent them today? If defending others justifies violence, what about defending yourself, your property, your honor? Every perpetrator of violence believes their violence is justified. The principle that violence is sometimes acceptable is principle every violent person uses to justify violence. The person drawing distinction between acceptable and unacceptable violence realizes line is contested. Defensive violence seems clearly acceptable. Aggressive violence seems clearly unacceptable. But what about violence in response to provocation? Violence to prevent property theft. Violence to enforce law. Violence as punishment. Violence as deterrent. The defensive/aggressive distinction blurs in complex cases. Every proposed criterion for acceptable violence is exploited by those wanting to justify their violence. What if violence won't stop attack? Attacker is much stronger. Your intervention will be ineffective. Attacker will overcome you, continue attacking victim, and now you're hurt too. Violent intervention increases total harm without preventing attack. Does ineffectiveness change moral evaluation? Should you attempt defensive violence knowing it will fail? Or does failure make violence unjustified because it achieves nothing while violating pacifist principle? What if excessive violence is required? Attacker is armed, large, dangerous. Stopping them requires severe violence, potentially killing them. Do you kill attacker to save victim? Now you're committing greater violence to prevent lesser violence. Victim might be injured by attacker, but you'll kill attacker. Is killing justified to prevent injury? How much violence is acceptable to prevent? How much violence? The person calibrating violence levels realizes proportionality matters, but is hard to determine. Minimal effective violence seems right. Use least violence necessary to stop attack, but you don't know in moment what minimal effective violence is. You might use too little violence, ineffective, or too much violence, excessive, and minimal effective might still be severe, possibly lethal. Can you use potentially lethal violence to prevent non-lethal attack, or should you accept victim's injury rather than risk killing attacker? What if attacker is victim of injustice? They're attacking person who wronged them, employer who cheated them, person who insulted them, whatever. The attack is wrong but provoked. Does provocation justify attack? Most people say no. Violence is not justified by provocation. But does provocation change your obligation to intervene? Should you defend person who provoked attack, or should you let attacker take revenge while you stay neutral? What if both parties have legitimate grievances, mutual conflict where both have been wronged by other, each is attacking and defending? Who is attacker and who is victim? Your intervention helps one side and harms other, but both sides have some right. How do you decide who to defend in mutual conflict? Whoever is currently losing, whoever started it, whoever is more in the right. These criteria are all debatable in heat of moment. The person facing ambiguous conflict realizes violence often emerges from complex history. Clear aggressor-victim scenario is rare. Usually both parties have grievances. Your intervention based on snapshot understanding might be unjust. You might be defending wrongdoer against legitimate response, but waiting to understand full history means attack continues. Violence requires immediate response based on imperfect knowledge. You must act on inadequate information when violence is occurring. What if intervening violates law? Technically, you're committing assault. Even if morally justified, legally problematic. You might be arrested, charged, face legal consequences for intervention. Does legal risk change moral obligation? Should you intervene knowing you might face charges? Or does legal system's determination of assault override your moral judgment about justified defensive violence? What if victim doesn't want intervention? They're in abusive relationship, don't want you to hurt their partner, even though partner is hurting them. Your intervention against their wishes violates their autonomy, but allowing them to be beaten also violates their well-being. Do you respect their stated preference or protect their welfare? Can someone consent to being violently harmed? If they consent, is intervention still justified? The person facing victim who defends attacker feels confused. Victim says, "Don't hurt them. I deserved this. They're good person, really." The victim is defending person hurting them. Maybe Stockholm syndrome, maybe trauma bonding, maybe genuine complexity in relationship. But victim is being harmed now. Should you intervene despite victim's objection, or respect victim's autonomy to remain in harmful situation? What if you're not certain what you're seeing? Maybe it's consensual rough play. Maybe it's performance. Maybe victim is actually perpetrator and you're seeing response to their attack. Your perception is limited, possibly wrong. Acting on wrong perception means you commit violence based on misunderstanding. Not acting means possible victim continues suffering while you verify. The epistemic uncertainty makes moral action impossible. The experimentation dilemma. When knowledge requires suffering, medical experiment might cure disease affecting millions. Experiment requires testing on subjects who might suffer severe side effects or death. Subjects are informed volunteers who consent, but consent might be compromised. Subjects are poor, desperate for payment, might not fully understand risks. Do you conduct experiment that might help millions but will harm some subjects, or reject experiment to protect subjects from harm? This is experimentation dilemma. Research is valuable. Knowledge saves lives, cures disease, advances humanity. But research sometimes requires harming subjects. The subjects who suffer harm don't benefit. They're sacrificed for knowledge that might help others. Can you harm people for greater good even with consent? Or does human dignity prohibit using persons as means to others' ends, even when they consent? The person designing experiment believes knowledge is worth cost. Millions suffer from disease. Cure would eliminate that suffering. Testing requires some subjects to risk harm, but risk is clearly disclosed. Subjects volunteer. They consent. Fully informed adults consenting to participate in risky research for greater good. What's morally problematic about this? Conduct the experiment. But consent is questionable. Subjects are poor. Payment for participation is substantial to them. They're consenting because they need money. Is consent under financial pressure genuine consent? Or is it exploitation disguised as voluntary participation? Rich people don't volunteer for risky experiments. Poor people do. Is this justice or exploitation? Maybe experiment is wrong, not because it harms subjects, but because only vulnerable people consent to being harmed. The person examining consent realizes perfect voluntariness is impossible. Everyone has pressures, constraints, needs affecting their choices. Pure free choice, without any influencing factors, doesn't exist. But some pressures compromise consent more than others. Financial desperation seems to compromise consent in a way that mild financial interest doesn't. Where's the line between acceptable and unacceptable influence on consent? How desperate is too desperate to consent? How much payment is too much? What if experiment is only way to gain knowledge? No alternatives exist. Computer models insufficient. Animal testing inadequate. Existing data incomplete. Human testing is necessary for breakthrough. Without experiment, millions continue suffering. With experiment, some subjects harmed, but millions potentially helped. The necessity of human testing seems to justify it, even with consent concerns. But necessity doesn't eliminate exploitation. Necessary exploitation is still exploitation. What if subjects don't fully understand risks? Informed consent requires understanding, but medical risks are complex. Subjects might understand words but not truly grasp what they're risking. They sign forms, hear explanations, ask questions. But real understanding of medical risk requires expertise they lack. Is it possible to give truly informed consent to something you can't fully understand? Or is all medical consent necessarily partly uninformed? The person simplifying consent forms to improve understanding realizes simplification reduces accuracy. Complex risks can't be fully explained simply. Simple explanations omit important details. But complex explanations aren't understood. You can be thorough and incomprehensible, or simple and misleading. Neither achieves genuine informed consent. The consent is either uninformed because too complex, or misinformed because too simple. True informed consent might be impossible for complex medical procedures. What if experiment harms more subjects than anticipated? You estimated 10% would suffer side effects. Actually, 30% suffer. You didn't lie. You stated risk based on best knowledge, but knowledge was incomplete. Subjects consented to estimated risk that proved understated. They consented to research more dangerous than disclosed. Is this acceptable? You were honest about uncertainty, but honesty about uncertainty doesn't make resulting harm acceptable to subjects who suffer it. What if experiment is abandoned after subjects already harmed? First, subjects suffer severely. Researchers see harm, stop experiment to protect future subjects. But initial subjects already suffered. They sacrificed without experiment completing. Their suffering contributed no knowledge. Experiment stopped too early. They're harmed without even the justification that their suffering helped others. Is harm for incomplete knowledge worse than harm for complete knowledge? The person protecting future subjects by stopping experiment faces initial subjects' anger. You stopped experiment, so my suffering was pointless. If you'd continued, at least my suffering would have contributed to knowledge. You protected later subjects but left me with pointless harm. The initial subjects wanted experiment to continue, not because they're cruel, but because continuation would give meaning to their suffering. Stopping experiment seems compassionate to future subjects, cruel to initial subjects. What if minority population is overrepresented in research? Drug being developed primarily helps majority population. Research subjects are primarily minority population. They're poorer, more desperate for payment. Minority bears risk for majority benefit. This is unjust distribution of research burden. But excluding minority from research is also problematic. They're denied participation, denied payment, denied potential benefit from research. How do you conduct necessary research without exploiting vulnerable populations? What if successful drug is unaffordable? Research subjects risked health to develop drug. Drug succeeds, but drug is patented, expensive, inaccessible to poor, including research subjects. They bore risk without receiving benefit. They help develop drug that helps rich people, while they remain unable to afford it. The distributive injustice is clear, but research and manufacturing have costs. Someone must pay. Should research subjects receive free drug as compensation for participation? But that's potentially coercive. Participate and get free drug. The person considering research ethics realizes every protection creates new problem. Requiring genuine consent excludes desperate. Restricting payment reduces coercion but also reduces participation. Protecting vulnerable populations prevents exploitation but also denies them opportunities. Ensuring drug access requires controlling prices but reduces research funding. Every safeguard has trade-off. There's no research system that's both ethical and effective. You can be cautious and slow, or fast and exploitative. The middle ground is elusive. What if experiment uses prisoners? Captive population, easily monitored, controlled environment. But prisoners are coerced. They're not free. Participation might reduce sentence, gain privileges, relieve boredom. These incentives under conditions of captivity are coercive. Yet prisoners are adults capable of consent. Denying them opportunity to participate denies them agency. Is research on prisoners categorically wrong? Or can consent be valid even under coercion of imprisonment? What if historical research used unethical methods? Tuskegee, Nazi experiments, various atrocities produced medical knowledge. The knowledge is valuable, saves lives today, but knowledge was obtained unethically, subjects harmed without consent. Should we use this knowledge? Using it benefits from atrocities. Rejecting it wastes knowledge that might save lives. Knowledge can't undo past harm, but using knowledge legitimizes the methods that obtained it. What do you do with knowledge derived from evil? The person using knowledge from unethical research feels tainted. The knowledge is built on suffering. Using it means profiting from evil, but not using it means past suffering was completely pointless rather than horrifically productive. Which is better? Give some meaning to past suffering by using knowledge, or refuse to benefit from evil by rejecting knowledge? The answer is unclear. Either way, you're living with consequences of others' evil choices. Neither accepting nor rejecting knowledge resolves moral problem of its evil origin. The future dilemma, when preventing future harm requires present harm. Environmental collapse is coming. Climate change, ecosystem destruction, resource depletion, catastrophic harm to future generations. Preventing catastrophe requires massive present sacrifice, reduced consumption, economic disruption, lifestyle changes. Present generation would suffer significantly. Future generations would benefit. Do you impose present suffering to prevent future harm, or prioritize present well-being at cost of future suffering? This is future dilemma. Future people have moral status. They'll exist, they'll suffer or flourish. They deserve consideration. But future people don't exist yet. They can't consent, can't negotiate, can't reciprocate. Present people exist now, have interests now, will bear cost of prevention now. How do you weigh present definite cost against future uncertain benefit? The person concerned about future believes preventing catastrophe is moral imperative. Future people will suffer if we don't act. We can prevent suffering through present action. Allowing preventable future suffering is wrong. Yes, prevention costs present generation, But preventing catastrophic harm to billions of future people justifies present sacrifice. Act now to protect future. But future is uncertain. Climate predictions might be wrong. Technology might solve problems without sacrifice. Future generations might be wealthier, better able to adapt. Imposing definite present suffering for uncertain future benefit is questionable. Present people are real. Suffering is certain. Future people are hypothetical. Suffering is uncertain. Can you prioritize hypothetical over real? Defer prevention to future. The person weighing present against future realizes temporal location shouldn't determine moral status. Future people matter morally, but so do present people. How do you trade off present against future? Do you maximize total well-being across all time? Minimize maximum suffering? Prioritize worst off? Every decision rule gives different answer. The uncertainty about which rule to use compounds uncertainty about consequences. What if present sacrifice doesn't prevent future harm? You impose economic depression, reduce consumption, disrupt lives. But catastrophe happens anyway. Other countries don't cooperate. Technology fails. Tipping points already passed. You sacrificed present generation for nothing. How much certainty of benefit do you need before imposing present suffering? If prevention might not work, does that release you from obligation to try? What if future people's preferences differ from your assumptions? You sacrifice present consumption to preserve wilderness. Future people value virtual reality more than wilderness. They don't care about preserving what you destroyed, present well-being to save. Your sacrifice based on your values imposed on future people who have different values. Can you justify present sacrifice based on assumed future preferences that might not match actual future preferences? The person uncertain about future preferences realizes they're making choices for people who can't consent. Present democratic process allows some people to impose values on other present people who can consent and object, but future people can't participate. You're deciding for them undemocratically. Maybe that's unavoidable. Someone must decide about future. But acknowledging that you're imposing your values on non-consenting future people should make you humble about present sacrifice for future benefit. What if sacrifice is distributed unfairly? Poor people bear most cost. They can't afford green technology, work in industries being disrupted, live in areas most affected by transition. Rich people bear least cost, can afford adaptations, have resources to weather transition. This is unjust distribution of burden undertaken for benefit of all future people. How do you justify imposing higher costs on present poor to benefit future people? What if future inequality means benefit is concentrated? You sacrifice present well-being to prevent future catastrophe. Catastrophe is prevented. Future people benefit. But future is highly unequal. Rich future people benefit greatly. Poor future people benefit minimally. You sacrificed present generation to primarily benefit future rich. Does future inequality change present sacrifice obligation? Or do you maximize total future welfare, regardless of distribution? The person considering future inequality realizes every future matters. Egalitarian future, inegalitarian future, whatever future people will exist, will experience well-being or suffering. The distribution among future people is a separate question from whether to help future people at all. But distribution does seem relevant. Helping future rich more than future poor feels wrong, but not helping future people at all, because help won't be perfectly distributed, feels wrong too. There's no escaping moral compromise in helping future. What if technology makes prevention easier later? Present sacrifice is massive, but technology improves. In 20 years, prevention might be cheap and easy. Sacrificing now means bearing unnecessary cost for benefit achievable later at lower cost. But waiting risks catastrophe becoming irreversible. How do you decide whether to act now at high cost or wait for technology to reduce cost while risking irreversibility? What if future people create new problems? You sacrifice to solve climate change. Future people create new crisis. Artificial intelligence disaster, nanotechnology catastrophe, whatever. You sacrificed for nothing. Because new problem emerges. Does possibility of new problems release you from addressing known problems? Or do you address known problems, despite uncertainty about whether new problems emerge? The person considering infinite future problems realizes you can't prevent all future harms. Some future catastrophes are unforeseen, unpreventable, beyond present capacity to address. Does this mean you shouldn't try to prevent foreseeable catastrophes? Or does it mean all prevention is futile because something will go wrong eventually? The logic of we can't prevent everything, so why prevent anything is wrong. But the uncertainty about which problems to address when resources are limited is real. What if future people aren't grateful? You sacrificed your generation's well-being. Future people benefit, but they don't appreciate it. They don't know what you prevented. Think present sacrifice was your obligation. Criticize you for not doing more. The ingratitude shouldn't change whether sacrifice was right, but it makes sacrifice psychologically harder. Are you willing to sacrifice for people who won't thank you? What if prevention benefits not just humans, but animals? Future ecosystems preserved, species saved, animals flourish, but present humans suffer. How do you weigh human suffering against animal well-being? Speciesism says prioritize humans. Anti-speciesism says all sentient beings matter equally. Your weighing reveals deep value judgments about relative worth of human and animal well-being. There's no objective answer. Whatever you choose reveals your values rather than discovering correct balance. The person protecting future animals at present human cost faces criticism. You care more about future animals than present people. This might be true. They value biodiversity, ecosystems, animal well-being highly. But stating this openly is politically impossible. They must argue protection helps future humans, but that's rationalizing deeper motivation. They're actually sacrificing present humans for future non-humans, but can't say that. The dishonesty is strategic but ethically uncomfortable. The loyalty dilemma. When obligations conflict, your country is waging unjust war. You're drafted. You have three options: serve in unjust war, refuse and face punishment, flee and abandon country. Serving means participating in wrong. Refusing means accepting punishment for being right. Fleeing means abandoning community and duties. What do you do? This is loyalty dilemma. You have obligations to country. Citizenship creates duties. Community deserves loyalty. Law demands obedience. You have obligations to conscience. Morality demands refusing wrong. Justice requires opposition to injustice. Integrity means staying true to principles. You can fulfill legal obligations or moral obligations, not both. The conflict forces choice between two kinds of duty. The person drafted into unjust war feels torn. Country needs soldiers. War is happening. Someone must serve. Community depends on fulfilling duties. Parents are proud. Friends are serving. Culture expects service. Not serving means letting others carry burden, abandoning community at moment of need. Even if war is unjust, maybe duty to community overrides judgment about justice. Serve, but war is unjust. Serving means participating in killing innocent people, in conquest, in evil. Following orders doesn't eliminate moral responsibility. Germans who followed orders in unjust war were held responsible. Americans who followed orders in unjust wars were held responsible. Being ordered to commit evil doesn't make evil acceptable. Conscience demands refusing. Don't serve. The person refusing to serve faces consequences. Prison, public condemnation, family disappointment. They're called coward, traitor, refusing duty, while others risk lives. But they're being punished for being morally right. Unjust war shouldn't be fought. Refusing unjust war is moral. But morality doesn't protect from punishment. Society punishes moral courage when moral courage opposes social expectations. Accept punishment for refusing unjust war. But punishment is severe. Years in prison, criminal record, damaged life, all for being right. The cost of moral courage is devastating, and punishment doesn't stop war. Refusing and being punished accomplishes nothing except personal suffering. Maybe flee instead. Leave country. Avoid both participation and punishment. You're not fighting unjust war, not accepting punishment. You preserve conscience and freedom. The person fleeing country faces different costs: exile, permanent separation from family and community, loss of citizenship and belonging. You're abandoning everyone. If everyone fled, country would have no one. Fleeing is selfish escape, letting others fight or refuse while you avoid consequences. You're free but alone, safe but rootless, alive but exiled. Is this better than prison? What if refusing has strategic value? If enough people refuse, war becomes impossible. Military relies on compliance. Mass refusal means government can't wage war. Your individual refusal contributes to mass refusal, but your individual refusal alone doesn't stop war. You're accepting punishment for symbolic act. You're one person in prison while war continues. The strategic value is real only if many refuse, but most won't refuse. Should you refuse, even though most won't? Or is refusing without mass movement just pointless martyrdom? What if war isn't clearly unjust? You think it's unjust. Government says it's necessary defense. Intelligence is classified. Maybe government knows things you don't. Maybe you're wrong. Refusing war you mistakenly think is unjust means not serving in just war. Serving war you mistakenly think is just means participating in unjust war. The uncertainty about war's justice makes choice between serving and refusing harder. If you're not certain war is unjust, does that change whether you should refuse? The person uncertain about war's justice realizes judgment requires information they lack. Government has intelligence, expertise, information you don't have. But government also has motives to misrepresent war as just. Your information is incomplete, possibly propagandized. Government's information is classified, possibly accurate. Neither you nor government can be fully trusted to judge war's justice, but you must decide whether to serve without complete information. Uncertainty doesn't eliminate need to choose. What if your refusal harms comrades? Other soldiers face greater danger because you're not there. Your refusal means someone else must serve instead. That person might die because you weren't there. Your moral stand creates risk for others. Can you accept responsibility for others' deaths resulting from your refusal? Or does harm to specific others from your refusal override moral principle? What if serving saves comrades? You serve not to support war, but to protect fellow soldiers. If you're there, maybe you save lives. Maybe your skills prevent deaths. You're not serving unjust war. You're serving unjust war to protect people trapped in unjust war. This seems like compromise. Participate in wrong to prevent greater wrong. But it's also rationalization. You're still enabling unjust war. The person serving to protect comrades is using unjust means for good end. They serve in unjust war, unjust means, to save soldiers' lives, good end. But consequentialism that justifies serving unjust war for good consequences might justify any evil with sufficiently good consequences. What if you can serve without participating in injustice? Medical position, administrative role, chaplaincy. You're not shooting people. You're healing, managing, counseling. This seems like having both, fulfilling legal duty without participating in unjust killing, but you're still supporting unjust war. Medics keep soldiers fighting. Administrators keep military functioning. Chaplains keep morale up. Every role supports war effort. You can't serve war without supporting war. What if historical judgment depends on outcome? War you think is unjust might be vindicated by history or confirmed as unjust. If you serve war later deemed just, you served justly. If you refuse war later deemed just, you refused wrongly. But if you serve war later deemed unjust, you served unjustly. If you refuse war later deemed unjust, you refused rightly. History judges your choice, but you must choose before history judges. How do you make right choice when rightness depends on unknowable future evaluation? The acceptance. Living without moral certainty, we arrive at acceptance, not comfortable acceptance, not satisfied acceptance, but recognition that moral life is more ambiguous, more contradictory, more impossible than you've been taught. You cannot be perfectly good. You cannot avoid moral failure. You cannot resolve moral dilemmas through clever thinking or strong principles. The dilemmas persist. The conflicts remain. The impossibility of moral purity is a permanent feature of moral life. The first acceptance. There are no right answers to many moral questions, not because you haven't thought hard enough, but because conflicting goods create genuine dilemmas. You want to maximize welfare and respect rights and honor relationships and be fair and follow principles. These values conflict. You cannot satisfy them all. Every choice involves moral compromise. The compromise is not personal failure, it's structure of moral reality. The second acceptance, being good person requires being bad person. Sometimes protecting one person requires harming another. Sometimes truth requires cruelty. Sometimes justice requires injustice. Sometimes love requires betrayal. The goods you value conflict with each other. Being moral means violating morality. You're not failing at moral life. You're succeeding at impossible project where success requires failure. The third acceptance. Your moral intuitions are inconsistent. You pull lever but don't harvest organs. You use defensive violence but condemn aggression. You protect family at strangers' expense. You judge past differently than future. Your intuitions don't follow coherent principles. The intuitions feel certain but contradict each other. You live with contradictions you can't resolve. The fourth acceptance. Other people's moral frameworks are as defensible as yours. Consequentialists, deontologists, virtue ethicists, care ethicists, relativists, absolutists. Each framework has compelling arguments. Each has troubling implications. You believe your framework is right, but others believe theirs is right with equal confidence. The meta-ethical uncertainty makes moral certainty pretentious. You have convictions but not certainty. The fifth acceptance. Moral luck affects outcomes you're judged on. You make choices, consequences follow, but consequences depend partly on luck. Good intentions plus bad luck create terrible outcomes. Bad intentions plus good luck create acceptable outcomes. You're judged on outcomes influenced by factors outside your control. The moral evaluation is partly arbitrary based on morally irrelevant luck. The sixth acceptance. You'll violate your own moral principles. You believe certain things are absolutely wrong. Circumstances will arise where doing absolutely wrong things seems necessary. Torture to prevent catastrophe. Lie to save life. Steal to feed family. You'll find yourself doing things you believe are wrong because alternatives seem worse. The absolutism yields to consequentialism under pressure. The seventh acceptance. You can't fix this through better principles. More careful moral philosophy doesn't resolve dilemmas. It clarifies them, makes contradictions more explicit, reveals how incompatible your values are. The study of ethics makes you more aware of moral impossibility, not better at being moral. The knowledge is enlightening and paralyzing. The eighth acceptance, moral failure, is inevitable. You'll harm people. You'll violate principles. You'll make choices you can't fully justify, not because you're a bad person, but because being person means making choices in situations where all options are compromised. The moral failures are built into moral life. Accepting this doesn't eliminate guilt, but makes guilt more bearable. The ninth acceptance. Living with moral ambiguity means living without certainty. You make choices without knowing if they're right. You accept that you might be wrong. You hold convictions while acknowledging doubt. You act morally while recognizing you might be acting immorally. The ambiguity doesn't eliminate action, but changes relationship to action, from confident to humble. The 10th acceptance. This is how it is. Moral life is dilemmas without resolutions, choices without right answers, principles that conflict, values that contradict. You're not doing something wrong by failing to resolve this. The irresolvability is real. Accepting it means accepting that being moral is harder than morality claims. You do your best in situations where best is inadequate. The inadequacy is permanent. The person accepting moral ambiguity doesn't become nihilist. They still make choices, still value good, still try to reduce harm, but relationship to morality changes from certainty to uncertainty, from purity to compromise, from perfection to adequacy. The trying continues without expectation of success. The caring persists without confidence in being right. The moral life continues, compromised but real. The intervention dilemma. When helping requires violating, a country is committing genocide against ethnic minority. Hundreds of thousands are being killed. Your country has military power to stop the genocide through invasion. But invasion violates sovereignty, will kill soldiers on both sides, might destabilize region, sets precedent for military intervention. Do you invade to stop genocide, or respect sovereignty while genocide continues? This is intervention dilemma. Humanitarian concern demands stopping mass murder. Sovereignty principle demands respecting nations' independence. You can save lives through intervention that violates sovereignty, or respect sovereignty while allowing preventable deaths. You can't honor both humanitarian obligation and sovereignty principle. The conflict is between saving lives and respecting boundaries. The person aware of genocide feels moral urgency to intervene. People are being systematically murdered. You have power to stop it. Military intervention will save hundreds of thousands of lives. How can you not intervene? Standing by while genocide occurs is complicity. The sovereignty principle shouldn't protect governments committing genocide. Sovereignty is forfeit when government massacres its own people. Intervene. But intervention is war. You're invading sovereign nation. International law prohibits this. Sovereignty is foundational principle of international order. Violating sovereignty for humanitarian reasons sets precedent. What prevents powerful nations from invading weaker nations claiming humanitarian justification? Today you invade to stop genocide. Tomorrow others invade claiming humanitarian reasons, but actually pursuing imperial interests. Respect sovereignty. The person weighing lives against principles realizes numbers matter. Hundreds of thousands will die without intervention. Sovereignty is important principle, but not worth hundreds of thousands of lives. Principles exist to protect people. When principle protects genocide, principle should yield. The abstract sovereignty matters less than concrete lives. The math favors intervention. Intervene to save lives. But math changes with military costs. Invasion will kill soldiers, yours and theirs. 10,000 soldiers might die in invasion. That saves 100,000 civilians. Still positive calculation, net 90,000 lives saved. But soldiers are your citizens sent to die for foreigners. Can you sacrifice your citizens' lives to save other countries' citizens? Do you have right to send soldiers to die without their country being directly threatened? The person calculating casualties realizes not all deaths are equivalent morally. Soldiers volunteer knowing they might die. Genocide victims didn't volunteer for anything. Soldiers' deaths are unfortunate consequences of their professional duties. Civilians' deaths are intentional murders. Surely preventing intentional murder of civilians justifies risking voluntary soldiers' lives. But soldiers' families don't consent to their sacrifice. Parents lose children for foreign policy goals. How do you justify that? What if intervention fails? You invade. Genocide continues in different form. Destabilization spreads. Civil war erupts. More people die than genocide would have killed. Your intervention made things worse. Humanitarian disasters are complex. Military force often causes unintended consequences. Do you intervene knowing intervention might fail? Or does uncertainty about success change moral calculation? What if intervention succeeds militarily but fails politically? You stop genocide, occupy country, but can't establish stable government. You're stuck occupying for decades. Occupation is expensive, unpopular, creates resentment. You saved people from genocide, but created permanent dependent state. Is saving people from genocide worth permanent occupation? What's your exit strategy? Can you invade without knowing how to leave? The person planning intervention realizes immediate moral clarity disappears in details. Stopping genocide is clear good, but how long do you stay? What government do you establish? How do you leave without genocide resuming? The intervention that seems clearly right becomes unclear when implementation is considered. Maybe moral clarity is luxury of those not responsible for implementation. Those implementing discover complexity that moral certainty ignores. What if genocide targets group you don't care about? Not racism exactly, but distance. Genocide in nearby country with cultural similarities receives more attention than genocide in distant country with different culture. Moral evaluation shouldn't depend on proximity or cultural affinity, but it does. You're more likely to intervene when victims are similar to you. Is this honest acknowledgement of human nature, or moral failing that should be overcome? What if intervention is selective? You intervene in this genocide, but not that genocide. Genocides occur simultaneously in different countries. You intervene in one, maybe because it's strategically important, or resource-rich, or geopolitically convenient, but you ignore other genocide. The selectivity reveals intervention isn't purely humanitarian. If humanitarian concern justified intervention, you'd intervene everywhere genocide occurs. Selective intervention suggests real motivations are strategic, not humanitarian. The person justifying selective intervention admits resource limits, can't intervene everywhere simultaneously, must choose which genocides to address, but choosing means some genocide victims matter more than others. The choice reveals hierarchy of human worth based on strategic interest. This is honest but disturbing. Pure humanitarianism would help everyone equally. Selective humanitarianism helps strategically valuable people. Which are you doing? What if country committing genocide is powerful? Nuclear weapons, strong military, ability to retaliate. Intervention risks nuclear war, regional conflagration, global catastrophe. Do you intervene knowing intervention might cause world war? How many hypothetical future deaths justify allowing actual present genocide? The calculation becomes impossible. Certain hundreds of thousands dead from genocide versus uncertain millions or billions dead from escalated conflict. What if victims don't want intervention? Some members of targeted group prefer fighting themselves to being rescued by foreigners. Foreign intervention makes them dependent, colonized, humiliated. They'd rather die fighting than be saved through intervention that establishes your power over their country. Does their preference matter? Can people choose genocide over intervention if that's their authentic preference? The person respecting victims' autonomy feels confused. Some victims desperately want intervention. Please save us. Others adamantly oppose. Don't make us dependent on you. Different members of victimized group have different preferences. Whose preferences count? Whoever wants intervention, whoever opposes, majority, most vulnerable. There's no democratic process for consulting genocide victims about whether they want rescue. What if intervention requires cooperation with bad actors? You need authorization from international body dominated by other human rights violators, or you need support from neighboring country that's also authoritarian. Stopping genocide requires cooperating with governments that commit lesser human rights violations. Does preventing worst evil justify enabling lesser evil, or does cooperation with evil contaminate humanitarian intervention? What if you're wrong about genocide? Intelligence is incomplete. Media reports are biased. Propaganda complicates truth. You think genocide is occurring, but maybe it's civil war or exaggerated reports or internal conflict. You don't understand. Invading based on wrong intelligence means you violated sovereignty and killed people for mistake. How certain must you be before intervening? What if you're wrong? The person demanding certainty before intervention realizes certainty is impossible. Genocides occur in chaos, confusion, propaganda. Perfect intelligence doesn't exist. Waiting for certainty means genocide completes while you verify. But acting on uncertainty means possibly invading based on misunderstanding. The epistemic problem is real. You must decide whether to intervene with imperfect information about whether intervention is necessary. What if intervention is motivated by guilt? Your country sold weapons to government committing genocide, or supported government during its rise to power, or created conditions through colonial history. The intervention is partly cleaning up your country's mess. This seems like accepting responsibility, but it's also convenient. You profit from supporting bad government, then launch expensive military operation to fix problem you caused, claiming humanitarian credit. What if non-military intervention could work? Economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure, international courts. These might stop genocide without military invasion, but they're slow. Genocide continues while sanctions take effect. Thousands more die during non-military intervention. Military intervention is fast but violent. Non-military intervention is peaceful but slow. How do you choose between fast and violent versus slow and peaceful when people are dying during the delay? The person exhausted by intervention dilemma realizes every option has severe problems. Intervene and you violate sovereignty, set dangerous precedent, risk military failure. Don't intervene and you're complicit in genocide. Abandon humanitarian principles. Allow preventable deaths. Partial intervention creates half measures that satisfy no one. There is no good option when genocide occurs. You can fail militarily, fail morally, or fail to act. Every choice is failure of some kind. The triage dilemma. When saving some means choosing others to die. Hospital has 10 ICU beds. 15 patients need ICU to survive. If all 15 share beds and equipment, all 15 will die. If 10 get full ICU treatment, those 10 survive. 5 die. Your doctor making decision. How do you choose which 10 to save? First come, lottery, age, likelihood of survival, social value. Who decides who deserves intensive care? This is triage dilemma. Medical resources are limited. Demand exceeds supply. Someone must decide who receives life-saving care and who doesn't. The decision determines who lives and dies. Every allocation principle seems both reasonable and unjust. There's no fair way to choose who dies when resources are insufficient for everyone. The person facing triage wants to be fair. Every patient deserves care equally. Their need is same. All will die without ICU. Their worth is same. All are human beings deserving equal treatment. But equality is impossible when resources are insufficient. You must discriminate somehow. How do you decide? Random selection, draw straws, flip coins, computerized lottery. Everyone has equal chance. No bias, no favoritism. Random selection. But random selection means young person might die while old person survives. Random selection means person with curable condition might die while person with terminal illness survives. Random selection is procedurally fair but substantively arbitrary. Outcomes are morally random. Can you accept that morality depends on coin flip? That who lives is random rather than rational? Random selection feels fair and absurd simultaneously. What if you choose by age? Save younger patients. They have more life ahead, more potential contributions, haven't had their chance yet. This maximizes life years saved. But age discrimination is unjust. Old people have value. They have relationships, wisdom, continuing lives. They're not less valuable because they're old. Why does quantity of remaining life override quality and dignity of present life? Age-based triage is efficient and discriminatory. The person using age criteria faces old patient's family. You're killing our mother because she's old. She's valuable. She deserves life. You're treating her as disposable. The family is right. Age-based triage treats older lives as less valuable. The doctor explains about maximizing life years, but family doesn't care about aggregates. They care about their mother. The utilitarian calculation is logical and heartless simultaneously. How do you look family in eye while explaining aggregate calculations justify their mother's death? What if you choose by likelihood of survival? Treat patients most likely to survive. This maximizes lives saved. Patient with 90% survival chance gets bed. Patient with 40% survival chance doesn't. You're saving more lives by prioritizing better prognoses. But this means sickest patients who need ICU most are least likely to receive it. Triage abandons sickest to save healthiest. This inverts medical principle of treating neediest. Can you justify abandoning those who need most help to help those who need less help? What if you choose by social value? Save doctors, teachers, parents, people with dependents, people who contribute significantly. This seems to maximize social good. These people help many others, but measuring social value is subjective, biased, dangerous. Who decides value? Do childless people matter less than parents? Do unemployed people deserve less than employed? Does social contribution determine medical treatment? This is disturbing hierarchy of human worth. The person evaluating social value realizes any criteria reveals prejudices. Value to society means choosing who society values. Current power structures determine who is valued. The wealthy are more valuable than poor, educated more than uneducated, employed more than unemployed. The social value criterion reinforces existing inequalities by making them life and death factors. Using social value means giving medical care based on social status. How is this different from explicit discrimination? What if you choose first come, first served? Whoever arrives first gets bed. This is procedurally simple, seems fair. No one complaining about being discriminated against. But first come advantages those near hospital, those with transportation, those who could call ambulance quickly. It disadvantages poor rural people without resources. First come is neutral on surface but biased in effects. The arrival time reflects socioeconomic factors, not medical need. What if patient's condition results from choices? Smoker has lung disease, alcoholic has liver failure, drug user has overdose complications. Did they cause their own medical crisis? Should voluntary risk-taking affect priority? Most people feel slight resentment toward those whose choices created problems, but also most people make risky choices. Driving, eating unhealthy food, sedentary lifestyle. Where's line between acceptable and unacceptable risk? Can you judge who deserves treatment based on their choices? The person judging patient choices realizes moralistic triage is problematic. Smoker's lung disease followed addiction that followed childhood trauma that followed genetic predisposition. Where's personal responsibility in this chain? Every bad choice has causes. Tracing back reveals circumstances beyond control. The moral judgment about deserving treatment dissolves into complicated causal chains, where responsibility is unclear. Can you deny someone treatment based on choice that might not have been free? What if patient is violent criminal? Murderer needs ICU. So does innocent person. Both will die without treatment. Do you prioritize innocent over guilty? Most people say yes. Innocent person deserves priority. But medical ethics traditionally says treat based on medical need, not moral desert. Doctors heal regardless of character. Introducing moral judgment into medical treatment corrupts medical profession. But letting murderer receive treatment that innocent person needs feels wrong. What if saving one patient enables them to save others? Patient is surgeon. If you save them, they'll save hundreds of patients over their career. Another patient is retired. Saving them benefits them only. Do you calculate future utility? Saving surgeon creates more total good than saving retiree. But this calculation treats people as means to social ends rather than ends in themselves. The surgeon is valuable for what they can do, not for who they are. This is disturbing view of human worth. The person calculating future consequences realizes uncertainty matters. Surgeon might save hundreds, or might die in car accident tomorrow, or develop illness preventing practice, or become alcoholic and kill patients through negligence. The future utility is speculation. You're choosing who lives based on predicted future that might not occur. The prediction feels rational but is actually guess. How much weight should uncertain future benefits have in present life and death decisions? What if you involve patients in decision? Tell all 15 patients situation. Let them discuss, negotiate, decide among themselves who gets treatment. This shifts burden from doctor to patients. Democratic decision by those affected. But patients are terrified, dying, desperate. Can they make rational decision? Will strongest personalities dominate? Will patients with families use emotional manipulation? The democratic process under terror and time pressure might be worse than doctor's decision. What if patients can't decide? Deadlock, no consensus. Everyone wants treatment. No one volunteers to forgo it. Time is running out. Doctor must decide after all. The democratic experiment failed. Worse, it wasted time, allowed more patients to deteriorate. The attempt to distribute responsibility democratically just delayed inevitable authoritarian decision. Was attempting patient democracy worth the delay that worsened outcomes? The person who attempted shared decision-making feels guilty twice. First, for forcing terrified patients to participate in choosing who dies. Second, for ultimate decision after democratic process failed. The attempt to avoid sole responsibility made everything worse. Patients experienced additional trauma of participating in death selection. Time was wasted. Outcomes worsened. The ethical attempt to distribute responsibility created more suffering than taking authoritarian responsibility from beginning would have caused. What if triage decision is repeated constantly? Not one-time crisis, but daily reality. Every day you choose who receives limited resources. You develop rules, protocols, scoring systems. The rules feel rational, defensible, applied consistently. But rules determine who lives and dies. The bureaucratization of choosing who dies feels efficient and monstrous. You're killing people according to policy. The systematization makes killing more bearable for you and more terrible morally. What if you're wrong? Patient you deprioritized as unlikely to survive actually survives when you allocate them resources belatedly. Patient you prioritized as likely to survive dies despite optimal treatment. Your triage predictions were wrong. Did you kill people through bad judgment? Is bad judgment different from bad luck? If triage decisions are judgment calls with uncertainty, how much responsibility do you bear for deaths resulting from wrong judgments? The person who made wrong triage decisions lives with survivor guilt and decision guilt simultaneously. Some patients survived who wouldn't have under different triage system. Some died who might have survived under different system. The doctor made best judgments with available information, but best judgments were sometimes wrong. The patients who died because of wrong judgments are dead. Does doing your best eliminate responsibility? Or does responsibility persist regardless of having done your best with limited information? What if resources wouldn't be limited with different social priorities? Society chose to underfund healthcare. Resources are scarce because of policy choices, not natural scarcity. You're making tragic triage decisions because politicians chose tax cuts over healthcare funding. Is scarcity morally different when it results from choices rather than nature? Does this change your triage obligation? Should you refuse to triage, demand adequate resources? But patients are dying now. Refusing to triage to make political point means all 15 patients die. Can you sacrifice actual patients for political principle? The person exhausted by triage realizes every allocation principle is flawed and every decision is haunted. Random selection is fair and arbitrary. Age is efficient and discriminatory. Likelihood of survival helps healthiest. Social value is biased. First-come advantage is privileged. Moral judgment corrupts medicine. Future utility is speculation. Patient choice is impossible. Repeated triage is systematic killing. And all of this occurs because resources are insufficient for need. The scarcity creates impossible choices. The choices create moral injury. And the moral injury is permanent cost of working in system where people die because resources are limited and you must choose who receives what's insufficient for everyone. The final rest. Sleep without judgment. We end with sleep. Release from moral evaluation. Rest from impossible judgments. Peace from dilemmas without solutions. In sleep, moral dilemmas don't disturb you. The trolley problem doesn't keep you awake. The torture dilemma fades. The impossible choices release. You're not deciding anything, judging anything, resolving anything. Sleep is rest from moral responsibility that you carried all day, knowing you couldn't fulfill it perfectly. Sleep is proof that you can release moral burden temporarily. Every night you stop being moral agent. You stop weighing options, considering principles, evaluating consequences. The moral reasoning quiets. You enter state without obligations, without dilemmas, without failures. The sleep comes when you stop judging your moral adequacy and accept that rest is needed more than resolution. The person who sleeps well is not solving moral problems before sleeping. They're releasing problems that can't be solved. They're accepting that moral life includes unsolved dilemmas, unresolved conflicts, impossible choices. They're resting from effort to be perfectly good in a world that makes perfect goodness impossible. The sleep comes when judgment releases. The rest comes when trying stops. As you prepare for sleep tonight, you can practice releasing moral judgment. You've faced dilemmas all day, small ones, large ones, daily ones. You've made choices you can't fully justify. You've violated principles while upholding others. You've compromised values to preserve different values. All day, impossible choices, incomplete justifications, necessary compromises. You've done your best in situations where best is inadequate. This is moral life. This is normal. Notice the judgment about your choices. I should have chosen differently, or I did wrong thing. These are harsh evaluations of choices made in impossible situations. You chose among bad options. Maybe different choice would have been better. Maybe not. The alternatives had their own problems. Can you release the harsh judgment and acknowledge you chose under constraints that made good choice impossible? Notice the judgment about moral ambiguity. I should have clear answers, or I should be more certain. These expect clarity that moral life doesn't provide. Moral philosophy spent millennia on these dilemmas. Brilliant thinkers disagreed. You're not failing by lacking certainty. You're recognizing complexity that defeats certainty. Can you release expectation of clarity and accept that ambiguity is honest response to moral reality? Notice the judgment about moral failure. I should be a better person, or I should live up to principles. These expect moral perfection in situations that make perfection impossible. You have conflicting obligations. You can't fulfill them all. You're not failing at being good person. You're being normal person facing normal moral impossibility. Can you release expectation of moral purity and accept that moral life includes moral failure? The releasing isn't forced. You can't force yourself to stop caring about being good. That would eliminate morality, not improve it. The releasing is gentler, accepting that caring about being good doesn't mean being good is achievable. You care, you try, you fail partially, you care again. This cycle is moral life. The cycle doesn't need to be broken. It needs to be accepted. Tonight, accept the cycle. Accept the impossibility. Accept the moral ambiguity that makes moral certainty impossible. Tonight, as you fall asleep, you're releasing moral burden that consciousness carried all day. The dilemmas don't need solving tonight. The principles don't need reconciling tonight. The conflicts don't need resolving tonight. Tomorrow brings renewed moral challenges, renewed dilemmas, renewed impossible choices. But tonight, rest from the judging, rest from the trying, rest from the failing at being perfectly good in world that makes perfect goodness impossible. Good night, moral being living in immoral world. Tomorrow brings new dilemmas, new conflicts, new impossible choices. But tonight, you can rest from moral evaluation that exhausts without resolving, from principles that contradict without reconciling, from values that conflict without harmonizing. The moral life continues, imperfect. The moral agent rests, inadequate. The sleep comes, amoral. And in sleep is rest, from being moral in situations where morality demands impossible things. May sleep come gently. May dilemmas release temporarily. May morning bring continued recognition that moral life is dilemmas without clear answers, principles that conflict, values that contradict, and that accepting this makes you more honest, not less moral. The dilemmas persist. The impossibility remains. The moral life continues, necessarily compromised. And tonight, you rest from carrying burdens that can't be perfectly borne, from solving problems that can't be clearly solved, from being good in ways that can't be fully achieved. Sleep peacefully, imperfect moral agent. The trolley still rolls. The surgeon still faces the dilemma. The lifeboat still lacks capacity. The future still demands present sacrifice. These dilemmas don't resolve because you sleep. They don't resolve when you wake. They persist because moral reality is dilemmas. And learning to live with irresolvable dilemmas rather than exhausting yourself, seeking non-existent resolutions, is moral wisdom, not moral failure. Tonight, rest in the wisdom that accepts impossibility rather than fighting it. Good night.